Ronaldo is an individual superstar, but the way he plays his game does not elevate the team. So what can we learn from this? First of all,
Adam Grant,
business psychologist,
one of the world's most influential
career and business thinkers.
He will help you do the best work of your life and reach your professional potential.
My job is to study how to make work not suck and help you become a better version of yourself.
So what are some of the myths and findings about unlocking our hidden potential?
These might surprise people. It turns out that perfectionism is not all it's cracked up to be. It's a risk factor for burnout. Firstborns score higher on IQ tests, but laterborns tend to be more willing to take risks. We don't procrastinate for the reasons we think we do. It's not hard work that you're avoiding when you procrastinate. It is decades of research on brainstorming has shown that if you get a group of people together to generate ideas, if instead you would let them work alone, you would have gotten more ideas and also better ideas. When people talk about imposter syndrome, that feeling is actually pretty rare. What's much more common is imposter thoughts, but there are all kinds of benefits of having those thoughts. For example, data from 50,000 people found that Chrome or Firefox users are on average better performers and they stick around longer than if you're using Safari or Internet Explorer.
Give me one more.
Okay, well, this is the most vital skill to unlock the hidden potential of yourself. So what you have to do is, before we wrap, I have a couple questions for you.
Why do I feel nervous?
You should feel nervous.
Oh, gosh.
First question is, what's something I can do better as a podcast guest?
Oh, gosh. Quick one. This is really, really fascinating to me. On the back end of our YouTube channel, it says that 69.9% of you that watch this channel frequently over the lifetime of this channel haven't yet hit the subscribe button. I just wanted to ask you a favor. It helps this channel so much if you choose to just subscribe. Helps us scale the guests, helps us scale the production, and it makes this show bigger. So if I could ask you for one favor, if you've watched this show before and you've enjoyed it and you like this episode that you're currently watching, could you please hit the subscribe button? Thank you so much, and I will repay that gesture by making sure that everything we do here gets better and better and better and better. That is a promise I'm willing to make you. Do we have a deal? Adam, at the very essence of your work, what is it you are trying to do, teach, or give people?
I want to give people the most useful insights from social science to help them think more clearly and critically and make choices that will build happiness and meaning and success.
And if you think about your career over the last couple of decades, what points of inspiration have you pulled from to give you as an idea of your sort of academic and experience profile that has poured into all of this work, all of these books that sit in front of me now?
So I'm an organizational psychologist by training. That means my job is to study how to make work not suck, which sometimes is a tall order. But I'm interested in how we find meaning and motivation, how we can lead more generous and creative and curious lives.
We were talking earlier about the books that you've written. This particular book in front of me here, Originals, one of my team members, Grace Miller, she went around our office and gave a copy of this book to everybody, and she wrote a personalized note inside. When you use this word originals, you yourself are an original in many respects. I had a read through your earliest years, and it was quite clear to me that you were different in several ways. Throwing that question back at you, I've got this photo here, actually. My team printed off for me.
Yeah. I was 7 years old, and I was obsessed with Nintendo. And I think there must have been a Saturday where I must have played for 7 or 8 hours straight. And then I got really frustrated when I didn't beat the game. And my mom said, like, these video games are just like turning my happy kid into a gremlin. And I'm worried that they're frying his brain. And she called the local newspaper and said, you should do a story about how video games are hurting kids. And they said, you're right, and we want to profile your child. So here I am with a lot of hair and no teeth, just hooked on a video game. And, what's funny about this is if you read the research on the effects of video games, it turns out that most of the benefits outweigh the costs. That kids who play video games, even a few hours a day, end up with more self-control, better working memory, more grit and self-discipline, because they're constantly having to face and overcome challenges and build their resilience. And there are even some possible mental health benefits. So video games were not the devil, as my mom thought.
It's funny because when I was reading about those early years where you seemed to be quite obsessive when faced with a variety of different challenges, it did feel like you're someone that's committed their life to trying to beat the game. First by understanding the game, and then understanding the levers you need to pull to beat the game. Is that like an accurate assessment?
That's fascinating. I never thought about it that way. I think that's been a huge part of my motivation. But I think at some point I got dissatisfied with the idea of beating the game, and I wanted to try to make the game better.
Interesting.
I think maybe to take a specific example, I remember, so I had a moment in, it was 2011. I found out I got tenure, and
tenure. What does that mean?
so essentially a job for life at my university. And the question is, now what? You can keep just doing research and teaching classes. And a group of students sat me down and said, you should write a book, because you should make your knowledge accessible to people who aren't in your class. And I felt like I didn't have anything to say. And I was passionate about teaching other people's ideas. And they said, no, your research has influenced us, and we want you to make that more widely available. And I think at some point it hit me that what they were asking me to do was to try to redefine the game. That at the time, I think the lesson I was trying to teach them was, you do not have to be a selfish taker to succeed. And actually, I'd done a bunch of research showing that people who were givers, who were happy to help others with no strings attached, in the long run actually outperformed expectations. And my students said to me, look, what you've taught us is we don't have to, kind of take a me first competitive attitude all the time, achieve a lot of success, and then start giving back. We can be sharing our knowledge. We can be making introductions to try to help people connect and expand their networks. We can be giving others feedback and solving problems for them. And that can actually contribute to our success. You got to get that message out there. And so, making the case that it might be better to be a giver than a taker was my first attempt to change the way we define the game and really the way we think about the rules of success. And that's kind of been my mission as an author ever since, to ask, what are we getting wrong in the way that we try to play the game, and how do we shift it?
I want to talk about that. And I'm a Manchester United fan, and I was thinking, I've been debating my friends in our Manchester United chat for the last 2 years about Cristiano Ronaldo. And we have two contingents in the group. And this is to your point about giving and taking. We have the one contingent who think that he was tremendously beneficial to Manchester United and really any team that he touches. And then you have me, who believes that on balance, when you look at the stats, he actually has a net negative impact on the team because he takes more than he gives. Mm-hmm. And then in reading your book, you used the word Ronaldo. So I feel like this is a wonderful opportunity to ask you about that and what your thoughts are on those kinds of sort of self-centered individuals in teams.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating dynamic. So I'm not a Ronaldo expert, mm-hmm. but the way that he carries himself and the way he plays his game does not scream giver to me. Mm-hmm. And I think the best evidence I've seen that speaks to this is a study of NBA basketball teams. So there are obviously some differences between basketball and football, but I think one of the commonalities is you have high interdependence, where the team really depends on every player to play a critical role. And what you see in the NBA data is that if teams have more selfish takers on the team, more narcissists, they actually fail to improve over the course of the season. You end up having a ball hog who doesn't elevate the team. And that's especially true if the biggest star or somebody in the core role is very self-centered. And so I think based on that evidence, there's a case to be made that Ronaldo is basically, he's an individual superstar, but he's not making other people better. And I think the most meaningful way to succeed is to help other people succeed. I think a true leader, I think Messi is more like this, is somebody who asks, how can I make everybody around me more effective?
I'm going to have to say I agree. And
do you?
Yeah, I do agree. And I spent some time looking at the numbers, and I credit The Athletic as well for doing a piece called The Ronaldo Effect, where they looked at every team he had joined since he was at Real Madrid, and every single team, according to the data, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here, I'll put a link in the description below to the article I'm referring to, had fallen in performance when he joined post his Real Madrid days, which means he went from Juventus and all these clubs, and they've all gotten worse. He's actually gone out now to play in the Middle East, and that club was top of the league when he joined. They're now second in the league, and they had a 6-point lead when he joined. So I think it speaks to something about this idea of giving and taking for optimal team performance. But Ronaldo, in many respects, is an original.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that.
You know what I mean?
I mean, look, some of the things he can do on a field, you just wouldn't expect a human being to be able to pull it off. So there's definitely extraordinary skill and I think improvisational creativity there. But yeah, we can ask some questions about, is that ultimately in service of the team?
When you wrote this book and called it Originals, what did you mean by an original? How do you define that?
I think about originals as people who don't just question the way we've always done it, but actually take the initiative to create a better way. So it's not just about having a new idea. It's about taking action to create change. And I think that's so important because I think it's often said that that ideation without execution is just hallucination. There's so many people who dream up interesting ideas but never do anything about them. And actually, I'll give you a personal example. When I was in university, I had a roommate. This is 2000, who had an idea for a social network, and he said, "What if we could build like an online yearbook where everybody had access to each other's profiles and they could communicate and they could plan parties?" And he stayed up all night coding it and actually building the basics of the platform, and then he never followed through and never did anything with it. And then a few years later, Mark Zuckerberg starts Facebook in the house next door. And I could look at that and say, my roommate was an idiot. Like, why didn't he do anything about it? But guess what? I missed that same opportunity. 1999, I co-founded what was called the first online social network on our campus. And it was an e-group we had connected about an eighth of our entering college freshman class before we got to campus. And we were all exchanging messages and connecting. And then we got to campus and we shut it down because we said, we all live in the same town now. Why do we need an online community? And so I made the same mistake. I was part of a group of people that had a very original idea and we did not execute it.
So the difference is execution there.
I think it's the biggest difference.
And what does it take for someone to be an executioner?
I hope no one becomes an executioner, but maybe an executor would work. I think that it's not what I thought. I think I assumed that you had to be somebody who was always the first mover. That if you didn't act on the social network idea in those first few years, it was going to be too late. But as I think you know this already, Stephen, but I was surprised to find that some of the best originals are actually procrastinators. That they don't rush in. They wait for their best idea as opposed to just immediately implementing their first idea. And of course, they're testing and iterating and experimenting along the way. But let's go back to my Nintendo days here. I've felt like I'm not an original thinker for a long time. And one day I had a PhD student, Jihei Shin, who came to my office and said, I actually think that procrastinating can make you more creative. And Jihei is incredibly creative, and I didn't believe her. I was like, no, this can't be true. And she said, really, I have my most creative ideas when I'm procrastinating. And I didn't believe it because I guess I've always been what psychologists call a precrastinator, which is somebody who the moment you have an idea, you want to immediately put it into practice. And so I was always excited to get things done early, and I was proud of being a good finisher. And Jihei said, I actually think that's a mistake. And I challenged her to test it. And so she went out and studied people in various jobs and had them actually fill out a survey on how often they procrastinate. And then their supervisors rated their creativity. And then we ran some experiments together where we tempted people to procrastinate by putting different numbers of funny YouTube videos available while they were supposed to be doing creative tasks. And then we got their creativity scored by experts. And lo and behold, it turned out that people who procrastinate a little bit are more creative than people who precrastinate like me.
What's your conclusion as to why?
Well, we had a few hunches at first that we tested. The first thing I wanted to know is what happened to the people who always procrastinated. And Jihei was like, I don't know, they never filled out my survey.
Yeah.
No, they did eventually fill out the survey, and
point.
they were also less creative. So both extremes were bad. If you never procrastinate, if you always procrastinate, you are less creative than if you sometimes do, or if you do a little. And what we found is there are a couple of mechanisms at play. One is that procrastination can lead you to incubate ideas in the back of your mind. So you have time to connect the dots, see patterns you didn't see before. Another is that you end up getting some distance from the problem, and that allows you to reframe it and look at it from a broader perspective. And so what was interesting in the data, though, was that procrastination only boosted creativity if you were intrinsically motivated by the problem. So if you were putting it off because you were bored or you didn't care, then it didn't stay active in the back of your mind. But if you were putting it off because you were stuck and you hadn't figured it out yet, or you were being patient and you wanted to have 10 or 12 more ideas before you decided which one to pursue, then you actually got a creative boost.
So interesting. And I really relate to it because...
Do you?
Yeah, I 100% relate to it.
Are you a moderate procrastinator?
Yes, 100%. 100%. I think this is important to say because I think sometimes people think that I get a lot of messages from people saying, Steve, I'm procrastinating so much. How do you not procrastinate? And I always look at that and say, look, I'm not the guy to tell you how to do that because procrastination in my mind is a bit of a tool. As you said, there's different types of procrastination that I notice myself doing. One of them is when I get stuck on something and I find myself picking up my phone as if I'm a man possessed. What I'll do is I'll be in the middle of work and then the next thing I'm on Instagram and I'm like, how did that happen? Oh yeah, because the part in this piece of work you got to is psychologically difficult for some reason. I don't feel prepared or whatever. And then the other thing I notice myself procrastinating on is just when I'm thinking through something, I'll end up just walking around the house. I'll end up cleaning, doing the dishes or whatever, and then coming back to the piece of work later. But I would say that I'm definitely a procrastinator.
That's so interesting. And I think, let's be clear. I'm not encouraging people to procrastinate more. That's not the goal here. The goal is just to normalize procrastination and say it's a natural part of the creative process. Everybody does it sometimes. And even though you expect it to be counterproductive, in certain situations, it can actually lead you to better ideas. And I think there's maybe a myth worth busting here. Research led by Fuchsia Sirwa has shown that we don't procrastinate for the reasons we think we do. So a lot of people think I'm being lazy. I'm avoiding effort. What's wrong with me? Why don't I want to work hard? But it turns out it's not hard work that you're avoiding when you procrastinate. It's negative emotions, unpleasant feelings. You are avoiding a set of tasks that makes you feel frustrated, confused, bored, anxious. A lot of procrastination is driven by fear. I don't know if I can do this. I'm not sure if I'm up to the challenge. And so I put it off. And I think one of the best ways to manage that is to ask, what are the tasks that you consistently procrastinate on? What negative emotions are they stirring up? And then how do you change those?
What do you procrastinate on?
I procrastinate a lot on editing, actually, and revising. I love rough drafting. It feels very creative for me. It's fun to figure out, what does the best evidence say? How do I tell the story that brings the evidence to life? And then the process of, tinkering to get each sentence just right, it bores me. And so I put it off. And I had to figure out, how do I make that more interesting in order to stop procrastinating altogether on it?
And how did you do that?
Well, one of the things I did was one of my goals in my recent writing was to try to get less abstract and more concrete. Mm-hmm. And so what I started doing was I started rewriting paragraphs in the voices of my favorite fiction authors, which was such a fun experiment. So how would Stephen King write this paragraph?
Oh, right. Okay.
How would Maggie Smith, an amazing poet, how would she write these sentences? Mm. And that made it a creative exercise again.
As I was doing my research ahead of this conversation, I was watching your TED Talk. And one of the things that really stood out to me in your TED Talk was where you start talking about internet browsers. I immediately checked which browser I was using, and I was using Google Chrome.
There you go.
But you make the case that you can tell someone's, I guess, creativity. I'm paraphrasing, I'm putting words in your mouth here, by which internet browser they use. And there was a really important message in there for me. So can you tell me about that? Exactly what the findings can tell us.
Yeah, I was sitting at a conference that I'd helped to organize, and this researcher, Michael Hausman, is giving a presentation. He's got data from 50,000 people, and he knows they're filling out a survey, and then he's tracking their job performance. Huge range of jobs, and he knows what web browser they're on. It's one of the automatically collected data points. And he's like, I wonder if there's anything there. And he finds that he can predict your job performance and also your likelihood of staying in your job from which web browser you're using. And this is so weird. And he stood up and he said that I don't know what's going on here, but it turns out that Chrome and Firefox users are on average better performers and they stick around longer than if you're using Safari or Internet Explorer. And immediately I had a hunch. I'd been studying initiative and proactivity and being an original thinker. And what hit me was Internet Explorer and Safari are the defaults. They came pre-installed on your phone or your computer. In order to get Chrome or Firefox, you had to question the default and say, I wonder if there's a better browser, and take a little bit of initiative. And so I start proposing this, and people are like, great. So if I download a better browser, I'm going to be better at my job. No, it's not about the browser. It's about the resourcefulness to say you want to be the kind of person who questions the default and asks if there's a better way. And I think what happens is in people's jobs, I've gone on to study this with some colleagues, the kind of person who upgrades their browser is also the kind of person who asks, is there a more creative way to do my job? Can I reinvent the way that we work together? And that ultimately not only makes you better at your job, it also helps you create a job that you want to stay in.
It makes sense. And so on an ongoing basis, I'm only going to hire people who have Mozilla Firefox or Chrome installed in their browser. It should be an interview question.
I don't know if I would go that far.
No, you said it, so I'm going to do it.
I think it's a fun question to say, okay, how did you, let's not limit it to the browser, but talk to me about how you've challenged the status quo in the past.
Yeah, it's a really good question. When we think about originals, who are the sort of landmark originals of our time in your mind?
What domain do we want to talk about? Are we talking tech and business?
Tech and business, let's go for that.
I mean, it's hard not to put Elon Musk on that list. You can love him or hate him, but when it comes to, dreaming up the vision and also taking the initiative then to try to make us a multiplanetary species with SpaceX and build reusable rockets, which, NASA had never really thought to do, moving us into an all-electric car future. I think there are a lot of things to complain about with Elon's leadership and decision-making and the way he communicates on the platform formerly known as Twitter. But I think he's an original, no doubt about it.
How does he fit your profile of an original?
I think he fits first and foremost because he challenges the status quo, would be the beginning. And then secondly, I think he's relentless in trying to make his vision a reality, which is, I think something that's driving some of his former fans crazy right now.
Some people might say, well, he was like a child prodigy or he was a child genius, so that's why he's so great. Do you agree with that statement or do you dispute it?
I think it's hard to say in his case. I think, my job as a social scientist is to ask, what does the evidence tell us about child prodigies? And it turns out we overestimate them in a lot of cases because once something comes naturally to you, you often have a hard time thinking about it in original ways. So, you see kids, for example, who can play a Mozart sonata at age 4, and they drill over and over again, and they're amazingly fast learners. And practice does make perfect, but it doesn't make new. They don't learn how to write their own original scores. They don't get experience with failure, with trial and error. And so they don't take enough risks to figure out, how do I invent something that's never existed before? That's not true in every case, but it is empirically true that most child prodigies do not become known as adult geniuses. And I think that's in part because they don't learn to stretch their creative muscles. Because
they're overwhelmingly talented, so they don't need to put in the hard graft that others do, and they don't need to fight for new information in the same way that others do?
In some cases, they get rewarded over and over again for basically just mastering the way everyone else has always done it. And so they don't learn to break free from the mold.
These adult geniuses then, what is it that they have that child prodigies don't?
Well, a lot of it is what I've come to think of as character skills, which is a set of capabilities to put your principles into practice. So they're often people with hidden potential. They may not be naturals at first. They could be underdogs or late bloomers or slow learners, but they are obsessive about making themselves uncomfortable, saying, if I only play to my strengths, then I'm never stretching myself and I'm not taking on enough new challenges. There's a bunch of research to suggest they're like sponges. They're soaking up lots of information and then trying to filter what's helpful out in, and then you kind of rule out what's harmful. And they're what I've come to think of as imperfectionists, which is they're really careful and disciplined about saying when is it important to aim for the best and when is it okay to look for good enough.
Perfectionism is a topic people talk about a lot. And I think it seems to me that everybody wants to be considered a perfectionist, as if being a perfectionist is better. Because what does that say about my values? It means that I really care about things being great. It therefore means, by way of that I think I produce great things. And saying you're a perfectionist is almost like saying I make great work. But you're saying that there are often times where it's better to be an imperfectionist. The judgment of knowing when something is good enough. Matters.
Yeah. I think you're onto something here. So, when you have to answer that annoying job interview question, what's your greatest weakness? It's everyone's favorite answer. I'm too much of a perfectionist. It's like Michael Scott from The American Office. Like, I have weaknesses as a leader. I work too hard and I care too much. And yeah, people do think that perfectionism is, ultimately more of an asset than a liability. And that's why they try to get away with that in the weakness question. But the evidence tells a really different story. Research led by Tom Curran here in the UK shows that perfectionism is not all it's cracked up to be. It's a risk factor for burnout. It also, if you look at the best evidence available, perfectionists do get better grades in school, but they don't actually perform any better in their jobs.
Why?
I think the jury's still out, but my hunch based on the evidence that's been gathered so far is that perfectionists are good at school because they know exactly what's going to be on the test. And so they can cram and memorize until they're prepared to ace the material. The real world is much more ambiguous. You don't know exactly what's going to show up in your performance review. It's not entirely clear what work is going to be valued. And perfectionists are terrified of failure. They don't want any flaws. They don't want any defects. They want to avoid every mistake. And so they don't take enough risks. They focus very narrowly on the things they know they can excel at, and they don't end up growing and evolving and improving enough.
I wondered if urgency has a relationship with this as well, because in order to be successful in the real world, you have to be somewhat urgent, which means sometimes you have to say, that's good enough, let's go, let's move. And I guess a perfectionist would, if left to their own devices, would try and slow time down so that they could focus more on this thing right now. They'd probably never ship that social network. They'd probably still be in their bedroom in America somewhere working on it. Whereas Zuckerberg made a thing that was good enough and shipped it, then learned from that. And the iterative process of making something better is probably more conducive with success than just, the lean startup talks about this a lot. Like,
yes.
Get it out there and learn from it versus just incubating it forever.
Yeah, this is I think a key Eric Ries point, and it's been backed up by a bunch of, ironically, experiments showing that founders who experiment more end up being more successful because they're able to pivot faster when something doesn't work, and they get lots of market feedback and signals on what's going to be successful and what isn't. And I know you've lived that,
Yeah.
but it's interesting that you point this out, because this is a lesson I learned firsthand during my days as an attempted athlete. So after being too short for basketball and too slow for football, I stumbled onto springboard diving. And I by the way, I had no business being a springboard diver. I was afraid of heights. And also my teammates nicknamed me Frankenstein because I was so stiff. But I really loved it and I wanted to get better at it. And I was a perfectionist and I thought that was going to help me because in diving, you're supposed to get perfect 10s. Well, guess what? I have my most basic dive, a front dive pike. You just jump up, touch your toes, go in head first. I wanted to work on perfecting that all practice. And I was working on these tiny little adjustments that would take me from a 6.5 to a 7 and not ever learning harder dives and failing to raise my degree of difficulty. And that really stunted my growth as a diver until one day my coach, Eric Best, pulled me aside and he said, Adam, there's no such thing as a perfect 10. And I was like, wait, have the Olympic announcers been lying to me when they say a dive was done for perfect 10s? What's going on here? And he said, if you look at the rule book, a 10 is for excellence. There's no such thing as a perfect dive. And that really shifted my perspective. And what we did then was we said, look, I'm never going to get a 10 on any dive. What we have to do is to calibrate what's a realistic goal for each dive. So for, front dive, we started aiming for 7s. And I would want to do 30 of them in practice. And when I did my third one and Eric said that was a 7, it's time to move on. When I was learning a much more complicated front 2.5 with a full twist, you do 2 flips, 360 turn, and then a dive. The first goal was we want to do this for 2s. we just want to make it. And then I got a little better at it and we started aiming for 4s and 5s on it. And Steve, I have to tell you, this has been one of the most useful lessons I've learned in my career is when I start a project, whether it's a book or, a podcast season, or I'm writing an op-ed, the first thing I do is I ask, what is my target score here? And for a book, it's a 9 because I'm going to pour 2 years of my work life into this. And, I hope a lot of people will read it and it's going to be useful to them. So it really matters to do it about as well as I can. When I'm writing a post for Instagram, I'm pretty content with a 6.5. Just above getting canceled is my target there. But that calibration is helpful because I could spend all day crafting that Instagram post and then I'll never get anything done.
When you're thinking about what's good enough through that framework, is part of the equation the return on time spent? Because I'm thinking about the Instagram quote, like if you have a 10 out of 10 Instagram quote, what's the return on that versus a 10 out of 10 book, which can completely, as we've seen, change someone's entire life? Like a 10 out of 10 TED Talk, you have a phenomenal TED Talk. I think it's got tens of millions of views. And that can change your entire life in a way that any Instagram quote, like I've had some banging Instagram quotes. I had a couple of viral ones. Yeah. And what ends up happening is everyone just copies what you said and just posts it. And it never really does anything for you. But a 10 out of 10 TED Talk like you've got, or a 10 out of 10 books, like, exceptional books, can change your whole life. So maybe part of the equation is to think about the potential reward from the investment.
I think that's such a powerful way to frame it. Well, let me react to a couple of things. First of all, I don't take 10s. So you're being overly generous here. And I always want to know, what can I do to get a little bit closer to 10? But I think thinking about the return on effort is really valuable. And I think about that less in terms of like, what's the immediate reward for me, and more in terms of how can I have the greatest impact for the investment of my time. And I think you're right. Like Instagram it's a quick hit of dopamine, and it feels really great when you get a lot of likes and, enthusiastic comments on a post, and then it fades really fast. And like, I don't know. I mean, people, when I first became an author, people said, well, the pen is mightier than the sword. And, of course, ideas, like, you have to be in that world. I don't know if the pen is actually mightier than the sword. I do know that the ink lasts. And that, people ask questions about a book that I wrote a decade ago. Nobody asked me about my social media post from several years ago. And I think podcasting actually lives somewhere in between, right? We like when we talk, sometimes ideas stick. Actually, there's some evidence that audio is more memorable and more intimate than what you pick up on the page. But I think it's a little more fleeting. Like I don't remember a conversation I listened to from a few years ago the same way I remember a book that changed my worldview. And so I put a little bit more into writing than I do into talking.
So interesting. I want to talk to you as well about something you mentioned earlier, which was this idea of doing difficult things. You mentioned it in passing. And the question that was stored in my brain is, what is it that makes a certain type of person choose and lean into difficulty? And a certain type of person lean out of it, because that appears to be one of the key sort of correlating factors with success in life, your ability to choose discomfort.
Yeah. I think this is such a vital skill. And I want to be really clear to say it's a skill, right? It's not just a personality trait. Some people are born with a little extra, maybe you could say, reserve of willpower, or they have the discipline or the grit or the resilience, and it comes naturally to them. But this is very much a learned skill. And I think the clearest demonstration of this for me is in the marshmallow test, which has been wildly misunderstood in the last few years. So you're familiar probably with the classic demonstration that Walter Mischel did with his colleagues, where you take 4-year-olds, you put a marshmallow in front of them, and you say, you can have one now, but if you're willing to wait until I come back, then you can have 2. And then the original finding is that if the longer you can delay gratification, if a kid can wait 10 or 15 minutes for the extra marshmallow, the better they score on a standardized test like the SAT a decade later, the better grades they get in school. There are all kinds of benefits of this delay gratification scale. Well, in psychology recently, there's been a controversy about whether it replicates. And some of the replications have shown that if you have a lower socioeconomic status, you struggle with the marshmallow test. It's really disappointing, but it's not at all surprising. And in fact, that was part of the original research, is if you grew up in a world of scarcity, and I know you can relate to this from your own lived experience, you could not afford to wait for the second marshmallow. It might never come. You didn't know if you could trust the research team to come in and bring you one. And so you didn't have the chance to practice that skill and learn the habit. But what's really interesting is if you watch kids who crush the marshmallow test, it's more skill power than willpower. What they have are simple strategies that actually make the temptation less tempting. So you see one kid will actually he sits on his hands so that it's a little slower for him to reach out to the marshmallow. Another covers her eyes so she doesn't have to look at it. And then there's one kid who actually smushes it into a ball and starts bouncing it. So like, you don't want to eat that anymore. And this is why I say it's a set of skills, not just a matter of will, because if you have techniques for making discomfort less uncomfortable, and you know how to get it, I guess if you know how to get comfortable being uncomfortable, then you are willing to go into many situations where you're a little bit out of your depth and say, yeah, this might be awkward, this might be embarrassing, but I'm going to learn something. And I guess, for me, that was public speaking. Like you touched on giving TED Talks earlier. I would have never dreamed of standing in a red circle. I had no business whatsoever giving a TED Talk. I'm an introvert. I'm extremely shy. I was terrified of public speaking. And in one of my first lectures, a student wrote in feedback afterward that I was so nervous, I was causing them to physically shake in their seats. And the only way for me to get over that was to put myself continually in that situation and get used to the discomfort.
Is that really the key here? Because I'm thinking as you're speaking about the people who I look up to, like even like a David Goggins, who just seem to be able to hold themselves in discomfort more than anybody else. I mean, a friend of mine called Russ is running the entire length of Africa at the moment, from the bottom to the top of Africa. He's running it. He's doing like 2 marathons a day, most days. And I'm thinking, are these people just like superhumans that were born with this switch in their brain that I can only turn on if I have some kind of traumatic incident? Or does the evidence support the fact that this is a learned skill?
I think everything that matters in life is always a complex interaction of nature and nurture. But I think we underestimate the power of nurture in these situations. So Goggins is a great example. I mean, he's a machine. Was he always that way? No. His whole story is about feeling like he was vulnerable and wanting to become somebody where no one could hurt him, right? And I think when psychologists study that, my favorite theory is probably called the theory of learned industriousness, which is a mouthful. But what it's about is the idea that if you reward effort, if you reward hard work, if you reward seeking out discomfort, then over time, being in uncomfortable situations starts to take on secondary reward properties. In other words, you get a little bit of Pavlovian conditioning where when you've pushed yourself a little bit past where you're comfortable, that feels good. And you're used to that leading to something positive. And that can become sort of a self-reinforcing cycle.
I was thinking as you're saying that about the role trauma plays in people becoming successful. And if we take on this idea that those that push themselves forward and then get rewarded for it are more likely to repeat that behavior, the question should probably become, who are the people that got the greatest reward from pushing themselves out of their zone of comfort? In my mind, for you to want to push yourself out of a situation, the situation's probably not great. And I was thinking about Goggins there, what he had to do. And many people that I sit on this podcast and speak to, it appears to be the case a lot of time that there was something traumatic or difficult going on in their home life with their parents, maybe, that forced them or pushed them to pursue something out of their zone of comfort. It actually often pushes them off the road most frequently traveled, and they become like an original because they went through the shrubs and the prickly bushes.
Yeah.
Is there evidence to support that it is helpful in becoming an original?
So it's complicated because I think in a lot of the examples we look at, there's a survivorship bias. we see the people who manage to overcome adversity. We don't see all the people who are broken by it. And so we always have to pause and ask, is this causal? Or is it just revealing that certain people who happen to face adversity and were able to take something out of that, we're growing from that. I do think what we know is that resilience is underestimated as a general rule. So if you look at, for example, rates of post-traumatic stress disorder, they are lower when people go through trauma than people's reports of post-traumatic growth. Saying, look, I wouldn't wish this on myself or anyone else. It was a terrible experience, but I had to grow from it and it made me better or stronger in some way. That's more common than being completely paralyzed or shattered by traumatic experiences. I think the other thing we know is that resilience is not an individual skill. It's not a muscle you work on just by yourself. It requires a support system, which I think of as scaffolding, a temporary structure that helps you scale a height you couldn't reach on your own. And I think a lot of what that looks like is having a parent, a mentor, a coach who believes in your potential, and not only helps you find the motivation, but then gives you the tools to bounce forward from the hardship you faced.
When we're talking about this point of nurture, I am the youngest of 4 kids. And in your work, you discuss how that can be consequential in my relationship with risk and convention and all of those things. What does the data say about siblings and how the order in which they're born can determine their character skills?
Okay, we need a giant disclaimer on this. The science of birth order is a mess. It's full of conflicting findings. A lot of the world's leading experts don't agree on the patterns. And what I'm going to tell you is I think there are 2 patterns that have very consistent evidence across large samples and rigorous studies, but they are tiny effects, tiny. So they don't say anything about you and your future possibilities. They're patterns across very, very big samples. So let me start with the bad news for you, Steve, which is on average, firstborns score slightly higher on IQ tests than their younger siblings.
Agree to disagree. I'm joking.
You're welcome to disagree on that.
I'm joking. That does make sense.
The major mechanism that seems to explain it is what's called the tutor effect, which is if you're the firstborn and you have younger siblings, you end up teaching them a lot. And when you explain things, you remember them better and you understand them better. Like the best way to learn something is to teach it. And the lastborn doesn't have a younger sibling to teach. And so sometimes they just miss out on that opportunity. Tiny, tiny difference on average. You will find many brilliant laterborns, many average intelligence firstborns. So don't take anything from that. But it's an interesting finding. To the point that you raised, the other finding is that laterborns tend to be more willing to take risks and become originals. And my favorite example of this comes from research Frank Soloway did on sports. So this is a study of every pair of brothers who ever played Major League Baseball. So you've got 2 siblings, same family, same parents, same upbringing. They both make it to the pros. Actually, sometimes there's even a trio. And the question is, which brother takes more risks when it comes to stealing a base? Which in American baseball is one of the riskiest things you can do because it's very easy to get out because you have to basically outrun a ball that's flying in the air, and you have to outsmart a pitcher and a guy who's ready to catch the ball. And it turns out that the laterborns are much more likely to take those risks. They're more likely to try to steal a base, and they are also more likely to succeed in stealing a base. So you're a lastborn. Why? Like, where does this penchant for risk taking come from? What's your hunch about the mechanisms?
Oh gosh. I know what it is. Because I saw it in your writing, and I was like, that's it. It's my parents gave me way more freedom. When I was 10 years old, and I say this a lot, but when I was 10 years old, if I left the house and I didn't come home for 2 days, there was no consequences. Whereas I watched my sister try that when she was that same age, and it was like we would call the police. If she wasn't
Yes.
home before like 10, we'd call the police. And as they went through the cycle of having kids and they got to the 4th one, it was almost like, I say this all the time, it was like they had assumed I was the age of the others and they assumed that their job of parenting had been done. And that's what I attribute it to. Because in that independence, in that void, you can start to experiment and you can start to learn and take risks. And then you get the feedback from those experiments, which for me was starting businesses at 12, 13, 14. First kid in our family to not go to university. So it made a lot of sense when I read about it. And I also do believe that all my siblings have a higher IQ than me. I think if we did an IQ test, I think every one of my siblings would beat me on it. And I think they would all agree. My brothers are geniuses compared to me. Jason, the sibling that's a year older than me, went to 2 of the best universities, etc. He's a genius. He's much smarter than I am. But he will even say that what he learned from me was risk. He says this. He said it this Christmas. He was like, when you came to my house when I was 18 and I slept on his sofa, he goes, he was in a university. He was off to get, really, really great job as like an actuary. He had gone to the London School of Economics to study that. And I was this dropout sleeping on his sofa because I'd stopped by London. And he said to me at Christmas, he was like, the fact that you weren't concerned about your future, it inspired me, which ultimately led him to quit his job in the city. He was like, I learned from you risk-taking.
Wow.
And yeah.
So that's amazing because you benefited from extra freedom and independence. Yeah. And then you were able to actually pay that back to an older brother.
Yeah.
I think for me, that's also the most compelling reason why laterborns end up taking more risks and trying new things. There is another theory that has some support that I think might be an additional piece of the story, which is usually the firstborn ends up sort of impressing parents by being a conventional achiever. And then the thinking is that niche is filled. And as a laterborn, you got to find a way to stand out. Like, well, getting good grades in school is not going to differentiate me from my older siblings. They're always going to be ahead of me. So let me try something that's a little bit road less traveled.
Well, I completely relate to that as well. Risk-taking. It is often believed that risk-taking is a key factor in what makes entrepreneurs successful in their life. But your research and your work in Originals in chapter 1, page 17, kind of starts to debunk that myth in I think a really liberating way.
This is good news for me as somebody who's not a big risk taker. It turns out that risk takers are more likely to become entrepreneurs, but the most successful entrepreneurs don't love risk. They take cautious risks, and they're constantly trying to figure out how to reduce the downside and increase the upside. I guess this goes in 2 directions. One direction is to say, if you never take a risk, that's actually a risky way to live your life. It's like building a stock portfolio where you only invest in safe, predictable mutual funds. No, you need a balanced portfolio. You're actually safer if you have some risky investments and some more cautious investments. And I think life is like that too. I think on the other side of that, though, you don't want to just be throwing caution to the wind and making a bunch of dumb bets. What you want to do is you want to figure out what's the probability of this unproven idea succeeding, and then do whatever you can to raise those odds.
Interesting. Because that's not the story we hear in the movies and in the, and I guess that's part because we want to frame ourselves as heroes when we tell our own story. And so framing oneself as a hero involves showing a huge, courageous risk you took. Whereas really, if you zoom in, you'll see how the best entrepreneurs protected their downside of that risk.
Yeah. I think that's critical. So let's go back to Elon as an example. I had dinner with him a few years ago, sort of interested in what can we learn from what's worked for him, and then also what hasn't. And I was talking to him about risk taking, and he was talking a lot about wanting to put the first humans on Mars. And I said, how could you possibly be willing to gamble on that? It seems so unlikely. And he said, well, when I first started, I knew it was extremely low probability. And so that wasn't the original mission for SpaceX. The mission was, I want to build a reusable rocket. And that's much more realistic. And I can get people on board with that. And I can get a government contract to do that. And I said, okay, quantify this for me. Like, what are the odds that you're going to make it to Mars in your lifetime? And he said, well, a couple of years ago, I would have said, I don't know, 7-8%. I'm like, and you're doing this despite that? And he said, well, no, the probability's gone way up since then. I'm like, okay, tell me more. And he said, I'd probably say 11% chance now. This is firing you up? He's like, come on, that's double digits. Like we're close to reality. But I think that calculus of saying, I've got to know that this is unrealistic, and I've got to have a side bet, which is something that can build me a viable company. And reusable rockets are what did it. That's what made SpaceX work. is not the mission, the moonshot, or actually it's a Mars shot. That's not what ultimately allowed them to do what they do now.
Is that in part on his behalf a bit of a framing thing to, as you said, get people on board? Because I think about Neuralink in the same way. When he first started talking about Neuralink, it was all about interfacing with AI and our need. The AI is coming and we need a way to be able to interface with it because it's going to be so much smarter than us that we basically need to become these cyborgs. And in more recent times, he's focused on the ability to give people who have lost access to their limbs, the use of their limbs back. And I was thinking about the transition there he's done in messaging. The latter, this idea of helping people who are disabled regain their ability, seems to be an idea that people will get on board with and will fund. The other idea of interfacing with AI and us becoming cyborgs doesn't appear to me like something people would get behind and fund.
No, they either don't get it or they don't want it.
Yeah, exactly.
Not for me. This is a common challenge for original thinkers, is sometimes their bold visions are just not palatable to other people. And there's a term that I love that Deborah Meyerson and Maureen Scully coined. They talk about being a tempered radical, which I think is a great phrase to say, take your big extreme idea and try to moderate it to make it a little bit more familiar and a little bit closer to what other people think is plausible and desirable. And then if you do that successfully, you can smuggle your vision inside a Trojan horse.
And that's all about bringing them with you. Interesting. Let's talk about people then. People in teams. So one of my real obsessions is the topic of team culture, and it's something that you write about in part 2 of your book. Team culture. What are we generally missing about what it takes to be and to build a great team? What are some of the sort of first myths that come to mind about the greatest teams that your work has debunked?
Well, this is one of the big topics in my world of organizational psychology, and there are, I think, a bunch of findings that might surprise people. The first one is that we elevate the wrong people to leadership roles consistently. There's research on what's called the Babel effect, which is the idea that the more you talk in a meeting, the more likely you are to get selected as the leader of a team. So we reward people who dominate the conversation, even though they are not actually better at leadership. And often they're worse because they fail to include and learn from the voices around them in the room. They're so obsessed with being the smartest person in the room that they fail to make the room smarter. And I think what happens there is that we're consistently mistaking their confidence for competence. So we need to change that. The people I want to elevate into leadership roles are basically people who bring generosity and humility to the table. Generosity is about saying, I'm going to put my mission above my ego, and I'm going to try to make everybody in the room better. And I guess it's a form of servant leadership. And humility is about saying, it's my job to know what I don't know and try to learn from every single person I work with. And I think the idea of being a lifelong learner is something we throw around a lot, but we don't take seriously. I think part of being a lifelong learner is recognizing that every person you meet is a potential teacher. Every single collaborator of yours has lived experiences you haven't, has expertise that you don't. And if you fail to realize that, you are stunting your own progress. So I think we've got to get humble givers into leadership roles because they're there to make the team successful.
I've always had a suspicion that based on the size of the company and where it is in its life cycle, that a slightly different culture is required. And in your work, you talk about these commitment cultures. Now, a commitment culture, is that a cult?
I hope not. The good ones aren't.
Okay.
So you're anticipating the Barron and Hannon research on hundreds of startups for 15 years. And they compare cultural blueprints where some founders say, I'm going to build a star culture. I want to hire the biggest geniuses and the best talent. And that's what's going to make us great. And other founders say, no, I want to be about commitment. I'm going to focus first and foremost about, do you fit the culture? Do you live our mission and breathe our values? And then you run the horse race and ask which approach is more successful from a culture perspective. And lo and behold, the commitment cultures win. They are dramatically less likely to fail, significantly more likely to go public. And you think, we're good. Like we've hired people who are all in on our company. They made us a wildly successful startup. And then guess what? After these companies go public, they grow at slower rates.
Why?
There's a major risk that if you are hiring on culture fit, you are then saying, I'm only going to bring in people who are similar to each other. And you end up weeding out diversity of thought and background and promoting groupthink.
Interesting. So, okay, you're all a little bit too close to the same painting.
You're replicating what's already working for you and becoming more and more homogeneous. And this is not to say the culture fit is inherently bad. You do want people aligned on your 3 to 5 core values, and that's important. The mistake we make is when we look at fit, we think about, well, I want a bunch of people with the same personality traits, and I want a bunch of people who went to the same college or studied the same subject, and then you end up with a really narrow band of expertise, and that leads you to stagnate.
How important do you think the culture you're in is on your own chance of success and performance? I often think this. I think we've been lucky, even as a podcast team, to be in a great culture. And I play out the scenario, if you took one of our team members and maybe move them to another culture, how much would that impact that team member's personal performance and chance of success?
Oh, actually, there's Boris Groysberg studies this. He studies what happens when you're a star in one culture and then you move to a new organization. So he studied this with Wall Street security analysts, so finance professionals. Turns out if you are a star performer at your current firm and you leave for a new firm, it takes you on average 5 years to recover your star performance, unless you take your team with you. And then you maintain your star status from day one. What Boris argues is that we underestimate the importance of the people we rely on to do our best work. And this is not unique at all to Wall Street. You can see it in research on cardiac surgeons, where you know how it's pretty common for surgeons to operate at multiple hospitals. Mm-hmm. Well, it turns out that the more practice you have at hospital A, the lower your patient mortality rate is at hospital A. But then when you go over to hospital B later that week, it's as if you haven't practiced at all because you're with a different team. They don't know your strengths and weaknesses. You haven't built effective routines together. You are much more interdependent than you realize, even if you think you're an individual expert. You can see it in sports too. It takes pro basketball teams 3 to 4 years on average, even if you've recruited a really talented team, to maximize their odds of winning a championship because they just haven't figured out how to be effective together. There's even there was a NASA simulation years ago where you had to go through a flight simulator, and some crews were exhausted. They just come off of a multi-leg, multi-day sleep deprived journey, and others were well rested. And it turned out that the well rested crews, who were strangers, actually made more potentially catastrophic errors than exhausted crews that had just flown together. And having a little bit of shared experience was enough to compensate for the lack of sleep. Now, I'm not suggesting that we should have pilots fly together and only sleep for 2 hours a night. But the idea that your history together was even more important than how alert you were is something that I think we ought to take really seriously.
Gosh, it's like a double-edged sword though, because so your history together matters. So you want to be with a familiar group of people. However, if you're too familiar with them, you're not going to come up with original ideas and be as creative and innovative as possible. So that it's a balancing act between familiarity and novelty by way of introducing new members to the group that have new ideas as it relates to business.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And you actually see this in the sports data. After that, 3 or 4 years of experience together, the benefits of shared experience start to level off. And maybe the players get old. It's part of it, but their routines also become really predictable.
Predictable to the opposition as well in the context of sports. Other coaches can go, they always do this, they always do it like this. This is how we'll defend against it.
Same thing is true in business. I think it's one of the reasons why so much innovation and disruption comes from the outside, because inside an organization, people get so attached to the way we've always done it. They fall victim to what's called cognitive entrenchment, where they start to take for granted assumptions that need to be questioned. And you need to bring in outside talent, fresh perspectives, or rotate yourself. Shift your country, shift your role, shift the group of people you're working with, go learn a new skill set in order to get out of that entrenchment.
When you think about and when you study companies and people that innovate. Let's just focus specifically, stay on the idea of teams that innovate. Let's just, bring it right back to the context of even, this podcast. This podcast team is actually about 32, 33 people now across the whole sort of business of the Diary of a CEO. It's going well. We do well.
Say better than well.
Yeah. It's going well. It's like, we've done a good job. I think that's fair to say. But there's a risk with that, which is when you've been right several times, you can start to get a little bit creatively complacent. And also, I think it was Morgan Housel's book, Same as Ever, some research that shows when you are succeeding, when you're like number one at the thing you do, teams kind of switch off creatively and they go into a defense mode, which is, okay, this is how we've always done it and it got us to here, so let's just keep doing it that way. But to self-disrupt almost doesn't make sense, And so my question to you is, from what you understand, what is the best way to keep a team like ours continually striving for the next thing, even when the outside world thinks you do a lot of things right?
Best example I've ever seen was in a podcast episode I did at Pixar a few years ago. So let's go back to 2000. Pixar is at the top of its game. They've completely reinvented the way that animated movies are made. We used to think you had to draw them. Now they do them by computer. Toy Story is a huge hit. They've got monsters. They've got talking bugs. And, they're riding as high as you can in the entertainment industry. And what most companies would do in that situation is they would rest on their laurels and keep making films the way they've done them. Because like you said, we should double down on our success. We know our core competencies. We're getting a ton of rewards for it. Well, Steve Jobs and Ed Catmull, who were running the show, were not content to rest on their laurels. And they knew that when you're succeeding, you actually have the most slack capacity to disrupt yourself. Which is, of course, when most leaders are least likely to do it because they don't think they need to. And they said, we've got to shake things up. So they went and hired an unproven director named Brad Bird. He was coming off a commercial flop. His previous film had been just a huge disappointment in terms of box office returns. And Brad came into Pixar, and his charge was to change the way that they made animated films.
Why?
Because they wanted to keep getting better and they wanted to keep innovating. Mm-hmm. And Brad came in with a vision that he was told was crazy for a new animated film. He was told it was going to cost $500 million and take 10 years to make, which is just a non-starter if you're a film studio. And Brad got frustrated and he said, all right, you know what? He said, I want the pirates. I want the black sheep. I want people who are dissatisfied, disagreeable, and disgruntled. And I'm going to build a band of misfits to try to prove that this movie can be made. And that group ends up finishing in a 3-year period. So they shaved a year at least off the original expected time. They end up coming in under budget, becomes Pixar's most successful film ever, wins them some major awards. You might have seen it. It's called The Incredibles. And what I think is incredible, no pun intended, about that story is a couple of things. One, just the will to break something that's not broken deliberately. I think that's huge. Number two, what Brad does is he discovers that there's a particular kind of disagreeableness that's really valuable. It's not just being cranky and ornery for the sake of it. It's not being a complainer. Brad says, I want people who are like racing cars stuck in a garage. Like they're just being stifled and, shot down, and I'm going to open the garage and let them go. So in my giver-taker framework, I would call those people disagreeable givers. They're gruff and tough on the surface, but they're doing it because they want to help and they have ideas to make things better. And they're not content to just stick with the status quo. And there's a bunch of research to suggest that people who are highly disagreeable, if they're challenging people because they care, they actually end up driving more innovation. And so I've actually started advising leaders that most of us know the value of a support network and surrounding ourselves with mentors and colleagues who have our back. But what you actually need to get better is a challenge network, a group of thoughtful critics who you trust to hold up a mirror so you can see your own blind spots more clearly. And Steve, this is not the norm when I work with leaders and founders. I think it's pretty common, actually. I don't want to name a specific example here, but I have interacted with a fair number of entrepreneurs and CEOs who I have this vision of them coming into the office one morning and saying, good morning. And a bunch of people go, great point. It's a scary way to live. But you know this, as you gain status and power, it's harder to get people to tell you the truth. And that's why those disagreeable givers who are willing to challenge you are so valuable.
How do you cultivate that? What can you do to cultivate a circle of disagreeable givers? Or just people that are going to tell you the truth?
Well, the first thing you do is you pay attention to who has actually been willing to push you. And you let them know that they play that role in your life. So I've actually done this in the past couple of years. I've had people who, tore apart book drafts for me, people who told me I needed to go back to the drawing board on an early version of a TED Talk. And I've gone to them and I've said, hey, you may not know this, but I actually consider you a founding member of my challenge network. First response, what the hell is a challenge network? Because disagreeable people always talk like that. Yeah. No, they don't. But I had to explain it. And I said, I know I haven't always taken your challenges well. Sometimes I've been defensive. Other times I've just been dismissive because I'm on a path and what you brought was diverting. And I regret that because I know I need you. You have to push me to think again and question the way I do things. So if you ever hesitate because you're afraid of hurting my feelings or damaging our relationship, don't. The only way you can hurt me is by not telling me the truth. And the particular conversation I found really powerful there is to let people know that they often feel a tension between honesty and loyalty. I don't see a trade-off there. For me, honesty is the highest expression of loyalty. The more candid and direct you are with me, the more I will value your input. And sometimes that's enough. In other cases, I have to go a step further, which is something that I explored in some research. Turns out that sometimes asking people for input doesn't get them over the hurdle. They're still afraid, or they think it's just an exercise in futility. So what you have to do is criticize yourself out loud and say, here are the things I think I'm bad at. Here are the current shortcomings I see in my work. And what you're doing then is you're not just claiming you're open to feedback, you are proving you can take it.
So in that instance where you criticize yourself out loud and you say, God, I'm so bad at this or that, is in part why you're doing that to make it a safe space for them to then build on what you've just said?
Yeah, you're trying to create psychological safety, as Amy Edmondson describes it. And in some research that I did with Konstantinos Koutiferis, we found that when leaders sat down and didn't just say, I want to know what I can do better at, but said, here are the things that I think I need to work on. A year later, when they were randomly assigned to do that, their teams actually were more willing to speak up and challenge them and give them constructive criticism. And I think part of what happens when you do that, and I actually do this in my own classroom, I read students some of the toughest feedback I've gotten in my career. One said that I reminded them of a Muppet. Never told me which Muppet. Thanks for that. There was another where a military leader had written, I gained nothing from this session, but I trust the instructor got useful insight. It was not fun at the time. But what I find is when I read those comments out loud afterward, I hear much more honest input from my students. They tell me things that they think are not going well in my class. They give me new ideas for improvement. And I think what I've done there is I'm showing that I take my work really seriously. I don't take myself that seriously. And, I'm sort of unoffendable is the goal. And sometimes they build, like they'll say, yeah, like we see that weakness and you still need to work on it. And other times they say, well, maybe you have a blind spot. You didn't tell us about this area where you're struggling, but we see this here. Steve, I have to say, a lot of people get the concept but are afraid to do it because they don't want to admit what they're bad at to the people who work with them. Well, guess what? The people you work with every day, they already know what you're bad at. You can't hide it from them, right? So you might as well get credit for having the self-awareness to see it and the humility and integrity to admit it out loud.
On this point of teams as well, and groups of people, the other thing that was quite challenging that I loved that you discuss is this idea that brainstorming doesn't really work well. And to maximize collective intelligence, we get more and better ideas when we work alone. And again, there's a through line here with what we said at the start about procrastination and the use of boredom. One thing that's really helped me recently that I wanted to share and see if there's any resonance with you is when I have ideas, usually when I'm alone, to be fair, or when I'm reading or when I'm thinking or writing about something. I then write them out into memos now, which is just like a couple of pages for me to understand them. And then I share them with people. Before, I didn't do that. Before, I was a bit more of a pepperer, i.e. I'd take something I was thinking about and just pepper it into like a group chat. Whereas now having time and space to write about it seems to be helping me to refine the ideas better, but just helps me to come up with better ideas. My question here is about how groups of people form their best ideas and what you would suggest based on the research.
Well, you're living the evidence. So let's unpack this a little bit. I think decades of research on brainstorming have shown that if you get a group of people together to generate ideas, if instead you would put them in separate rooms and let them work alone, you would have gotten more ideas and also better ideas. A lot of people are surprised by this, and there are a few reasons behind it that have good support. One is called production blocking. We can't all talk at once. Some ideas get lost. 2 is ego threat. I don't want to look like an idiot, so I bite my tongue on my most unconventional ideas. And then 3 is conformity pressure, which is sometimes called the HIPPO effect. My favorite acronym, HIPPO, stands for the highest paid person's opinion.
Interesting.
As soon as that's known, people jump on the bandwagon, and you get too much convergent thinking, not enough divergent thinking.
How do we get past that in organizations? Is it about anonymity with ideas?
It can be. If you're in a low psychological safety environment where people are worried about their reputations, then yes, anonymous ideas help. But I want to get to a point where people are willing to put their names on their ideas. So I want to go in the direction that you've gone personally, which is psychologists recommend brain writing as an alternative to brainstorming. What you do is you recognize that writing is not just a tool for communicating, it's a tool for thinking. When you write out your thoughts, you can't get away with a half-baked idea that kind of is sold by your charisma. You actually get tested on your logic. And what you do is recognize that individuals are more creative than groups. They have more brilliant ideas. They have more variety than groups do. But they also have more terrible ideas than groups. And so we need a process to generate variety and then filter toward quality. And what brainwriting does is you have everybody write down their own separate ideas. Then you collect them and you have everyone do independent ratings. So you get their judgment preserved before they're biased by what their peers think. Then once you have all the ratings, you take the most promising ideas and you begin developing and refining those. And what you're trying to do then is to take the wisdom of crowds to make the ideas with high potential succeed. And I think for me, brainwriting is one of the best ways to unlock the hidden potential in the group because it is not the loudest talker. It's not the most enthusiastic speaker who necessarily has the most compelling ideas.
I was thinking as you're talking about how I might implement that into some of my teams, and I was thinking about, so how would you create anonymity of the submission of the idea without people having some idea based on the way the person's writing who it is? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because there's some people I think in my teams that you'd be able to just know from how they wrote something who it was. Yep.
Here's an idea.
Yeah.
Thinking out loud. One thing I've tried from time to time is I've paired people up to then write down and pitch each other's ideas.
Oh, okay.
So you're separating the person who had the thought from the way it's being communicated. And I wonder if rotating a little bit that way could help.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So you could have one person read out all the ideas basically to a full group and then have them rate independently. Or yeah, interesting. Potential. Why did you write this book, Hidden Potential?
I wrote it really for 2 reasons. One is that I saw in the evidence that we underestimate potential in ourselves and others consistently. We think you can judge where people will land from where they start. But as we talked about with prodigies earlier, you can't always do that. And I'd read some classic research on world-class musicians, artists, athletes, and scientists showing that they rarely stood out as better than their peers early on. Their early teachers, their coaches, even their own parents didn't know how much potential they had. And when they did stand out, it was not for unusual ability. It was for unusual motivation. They were driven, they were passionate. And I wanted to dispel the myth that if you're not instantly good at something, you should walk away from it and only play to your strengths. And I wanted to do that in part because it wasn't just the evidence that spoke to me. I lived this. Right? I was a terrible springboard diver when I started. I never would have imagined that I was going to be a junior Olympic national qualifier. As we talked about, I really struggled with public speaking. I didn't expect to go there. And I also, I failed the writing test when I arrived at university and was assigned to remedial writing. And here I am, an author. And so I've lived hidden potential along with studying it. And I felt like it was time to put those ideas out into the world.
Do you believe that your potential exists somewhere? Or do you think it's something that you create every time you push yourself?
Can I say both?
Yeah. It's probably that makes a lot of sense. I've always wondered this. I've always wondered if my life is the pursuit of my potential or if my life is the creation of my potential.
That is a brilliant question. I love the way you frame that. I think it's always a little bit of both because we all have different, skills and strengths that come naturally to us and different challenges that are hardwired. And so you could say, like, I had a ceiling on my athletic ability, right? Like there's certain things I'm never going to be able to do as badly as I wanted to become a professional athlete. But a big part of me learning how to become a decent diver was trying to raise that ceiling. And after I retired, Eric, my coach, said to me that I got farther with less talent than any diver he'd coached, which I wasn't sure if that was a compliment, but it actually is a huge compliment because he felt like I'd stretched my capabilities. And I think for me, hidden potential is about realizing that we all have capacities for growth that are invisible to us and sometimes to the people around us.
As it relates to unlocking that growth and being that overachiever that you were as it relates to diving, is there anything we haven't discussed that is critical to unlocking that potential?
I think so. I think
throw some of those things at me.
Yeah. So one of my favorites. So can I tell you a little story?
Please.
One of my other challenges as a diver was I was afraid of heights, and I also was afraid of extreme pain. There's nothing fun about doing a belly flop when you're up on a 3-meter springboard, never mind a 10-meter platform, which I avoided like the plague. And I was especially afraid when it was time to try a new dive, because I was going to hurl myself into midair, spin and twist, get lost, and there's a high probability that you're going to smack. So I would stand there at the end of the board shaking. I would waste a lot of time in practice. Sometimes it would be 5 minutes, 10 minutes. One practice, I stood on the board for 45 minutes and I wouldn't go. I was wasting my time. I was wasting my teammates' time. I was wasting my coach's time. And Eric finally said to me, he said, "Adam, are you going to do this dive?" And I'm like, "Ever?" Like, "Yes, of course. One day I will do this dive." And he said, "Great. Then what are you waiting for?" And I've heard that voice in my head every time I've been afraid to take a risk. And I've been hesitating to go outside my comfort zone. I heard it when I was afraid to write my first book and I didn't think I was ready. I heard it when I was considering giving a TED Talk and I didn't feel capable of doing a good job at it. I think the lesson I took from that was I thought that I had to build my confidence in order to take the leap. And that was completely backward. You build your confidence by taking the leap. And so I was kind of waiting for the magic day when I felt ready. And the reality is you become ready by putting yourself in situations that you don't think you can excel at yet.
Do you think that's enough to push people off the board? As a sort of an analogy for life generally, because there'll be so many people that have just heard that, and just hearing that will enable some of them to take the leap. And then there's this other stubborn crowd that will hear that will understand it, that will believe it's true, and they still won't take the leap. They still will stay in that job. They still won't push themselves beyond their zone of comfort. Is there anything else that's required to get those people over the edge? Or is it too individualistic to know?
Well, I think one thing that group of people might have in common is a pervasive imposter syndrome, right? The sense that, well, first of all, when people talk about imposter syndrome, sometimes they say, okay, like I'm a fraud and it's only a matter of minutes until everybody finds out. And that feeling is actually pretty rare. What's much more common, if you look at the research of Basima Tufik, is imposter thoughts, everyday doubts about, am I as good as other people think I am? Am I ready for this role that other people are encouraging me to take on? Can I afford to quit my job and try becoming an entrepreneur? And what the research suggests is that there are actually some surprising benefits of having those imposter thoughts. Basima finds, she studies medical professionals, investment professionals, military cadets, students, that when you have more frequent imposter thoughts, they actually can become fuel to motivate you to persist toward your goals. And the reason that happens is there's a gap between what other people think you're capable of and what you feel prepared for. And you realize, okay, I've got to put in extra effort and I've got to be better at listening to other people and learning from them in order to close the gap. So Basima's advice is when you feel like an imposter, you should recognize that other people think you're pretty amazing. And now, all right, let's live up to those expectations. And I would go even further. I would say it's really tempting to trust your own judgment of your abilities above other people because you know more about yourself than any other human can possibly know about you. But here's the problem. You know too much about yourself to compare yourself accurately to others. And you're also not neutral, right? You can't be objective and independent and unbiased. So I think what you want to do is you want to see yourself through the eyes of people who know you well. And if multiple people believe in you, it's probably time to believe them.
Give me one more. Let's make this the closing one. As it relates to realizing our potential and unlocking our hidden potential, which is, if I was able to achieve anything with this podcast over the time that we've ran it, allowing people to realize and pursue their potential, I think would be one of the greatest achievements that we as a team could have achieved by doing this podcast. Yeah. It's something that I think people's, much of their happiness, much of their fulfillment, much of their health probably lies in the pursuit of their potential, whatever that means. And all of the opposite stuff, much of their dissatisfaction, their unhappiness probably lies in their regret and their understanding that they can and could have done more in their lives. I mean, you think about Bronnie Ware all the time, that study she did on those palliative patients where so many of them wish they'd lived the life true to themselves. So many of them wish that they'd taken that jump and pursued that thing that was maybe a little bit more risky. So what is the closing argument here for those people that are trying to unlock their hidden potential?
Well, I think if you look at regret, psychologists find that our biggest regrets in the long run are not our failures. They're our failures to try. And it's the actions not taken that we wish we could redo the most. I think finding the motivation and the courage to take those risks is not always easy for people. And I think one thing that I've found helpful over time that has some good evidence behind it is a lot of us know we need other people's input in order to get better. So what we do is we ask for feedback. And the problem with asking for feedback is you end up with a bunch of cheerleaders and critics. The cheerleaders you don't fully trust because they see you through rose-colored glasses and they just applaud your best self. The critics are devastating. They attack your worst self. We want our coaches, people who see your hidden potential and help you become a better version of yourself. And Steve, you've seen this forever. World-class athletes and musicians and actors have coaches. We all need coaches in our lives. And they don't have to be somebody we hire. You don't have to have a budget. They're people that you rely on who are part of that challenge network, who enable you to keep growing. So how do you get your cheerleaders and critics to be better coaches? What you do is instead of asking them for feedback, you seek their advice. When you ask for feedback, people look at the past. If you ask for advice, they turn to the future and they become more specific and more actionable in giving you tips and suggestions. So if you go back, I'll give you the personal example on this one. Go back to the military leaders that I taught who told me that they gained nothing from my session, but they hope I learned something. I've got a bunch of critics in that situation. And they're demoralizing me. I want to give up. I'm like, wonder if I could actually build the ability to hibernate. And then in a few months, I'll feel better. But I had committed to teach a second session for these military leaders. And it was about a week later. I didn't have time to reboot all my content. And so I went to my critics and tried to turn them into coaches. And I asked them for advice on what to do differently in the next session. And one of them said, a big mistake I made was I led with my credentials. And I tried to convince them that I was an expert. Well, I was 25 years old. These are seasoned military leaders. They've got multi-billion-pound budgets. They've got thousands of flying hours under their belts. They've got Top Gun-style nicknames. I'm not going to convince them that I am more experienced than they are. And this one person said, you should try calling out the elephant in the room. Be a little more vulnerable. So I walk in the next week, I look out at the room, and I say, all right, I know what you're all thinking right now. What could I possibly learn from a professor who's 12 years old? Silence. And then one guy, call sign Sandoon, jumps in and he says, that's ridiculous. You got to be at least 13. They all burst out laughing. It broke the ice. I more or less taught the same material, but the feedback was much more positive afterward. They told me that although I was junior in experience, I dealt with the evidence in an interesting way, and they liked learning from somebody who was almost as young as the millennials they were trying to lead. And I learned from that experience that the very people it felt like they were trying to take me down, if I asked for their advice instead of their feedback, they actually gave me a tip that built me up.
It made me think about something that I learned from reading your work, which is this difference between self-promotion and idea promotion as well. I actually sent it to a friend earlier on. My friend runs a personal branding company. It's called Ashley. The company's called Great Influence. And he spends his time basically helping leaders build their personal brand. And he'll often send me things that he's seen online. And when I read about your concept of self-promotion versus idea promotion, I realized that all the things he sends me that are bad are self-promotion, and all the things that he sends me are good are fundamentally idea promotion. What is the distinction, just so we're clear?
I think the distinction for me is that self-promotion is about saying, look at me. Let me tell you about all my accomplishments and awards. I'm going to show off my trophies, and I'm trying to impress you and make you think that I'm great. Idea promotion is saying, I have something worth sharing, and I want to elevate a product, a service, an insight. And people have dramatically different reactions to the two, right? The first comes across as narcissistic and bragging and self-centered. The second is actually seen as an act of generosity. You're taking your knowledge and your skills and you're trying to create a gift for other people and hoping that they receive it. And I think this is so important because a lot of people don't share their ideas. They don't put their work out there because they're afraid of looking like they're self-promoting. And they are doing such a disservice to the world by not releasing their creativity.
So many people have a problem with that. So many people have a problem, especially when they're making a transition from being someone who was quiet or silent to that first post, that first book, that first, and part of that is because of the impact it has on the people that know you. So for me, for example, the first time I wrote like a quote or an idea online, I felt that anxiety of, oh my God, my friends from school are going to think I'm like Mahatma Gandhi or like Nelson Mandela or something because I'm sharing my ideas. And the sheer fact that I'm sharing my ideas means that I think I've got good ideas and I think I'm smart. And so the best thing to do is just not to share the ideas so that my friends don't judge me. For whatever reason, I managed to persist and I shared an idea. And I actually, in the early stages of sharing my ideas on the internet, I got some feedback from my friend Jamie that told me one of our mutual friends was like criticizing me. He would say like, who the fuck does he think he is? This was like 9 years ago, maybe. Who the fuck does he think he is? He thinks he's da-da-da-da, etc. That was difficult, persisted. And I'm so glad I did because it changed my life. And I think there's so many people that are in that exact moment where they've got ideas, they've got skills that they could share. It would transform their lives and add value to the lives of other people, but they're stuck because they're scared of it feeling like self-promotion.
I believe everyone has ideas worth sharing and that we have a responsibility to not deprive the people around us from learning. And I think the great thing about the democratization of knowledge is that anybody can access anybody else's ideas. And so I think there's an opportunity for all of us to put our thoughts out there. This might be an unpopular opinion, but I don't think the framing as personal branding is helpful because it center stage is self-promotion. I don't want to have a brand. When people tell me I said something on brand, I feel like I've been typecast or I'm losing my authenticity. What I want is I want to have a reputation. I don't want to be a shiny product that's packaged with a bunch of slogans. I want to be somebody who's known for a set of values. And one of those values is original thinking and rethinking. And that means I should even disagree with my own ideas. If I don't contradict myself, I am failing to learn. Gosh, I remember after Give and Take came out, I got branded as the nice guys finish first guy for the givers over takers message. And I was so annoyed by that, first of all, because a lot of givers aren't nice. Helping other people is different from being polite to them. And the disagreeable givers were a case in point of that. And eventually I was like, maybe my next book needs to be called Take and Take and write about why selfish assholes succeed, just because I'm so committed to evolving what I think. And I don't think you do that if you're trying to maintain a personal brand that's consistent in representing a certain slogan. I think you do that if you're trying to live a set of values.
Amen. It really has made me rethink not just the term personal branding, but really the true purpose of idea promotion is the pursuit of truth, right? And knowledge. And in the process of that, you obviously gain a ton yourself. But we talked about earlier, I think they often call it the Fryman technique, where by writing and sharing, you're actually learning more than anyone else. I think it was James Clear that said the person that learns more in any classroom is in fact the teacher. But the importance of being okay with being inconsistent, being continually wrong, your old work contradicting your new work, is very important, but not easy to do because of the cognitive dissonance that admitting you're wrong creates.
This is a central question of Think Again, and I'm so struck. I originally learned this framework from Phil Tetlock, and then I started studying it. I'm so struck by how many people spend too many of their waking hours thinking like preachers, prosecutors, and politicians. So when you go into preacher mode, you're proselytizing your own ideas. In prosecutor mode, you're attacking somebody else's ideas. And in politician mode, you don't even bother to listen to people unless they already agree with your ideas. And I always like to ask, I find that most people have a dominant style that gets them in trouble. So mine is prosecutor mode. If I think you're wrong, I'm like, it is my professional and moral responsibility to correct you, which never goes well. And I've even been called a logic bully, which my wife had to explain to me was not a compliment.
I think I'm a logic bully.
Are you?
Yeah, I think so sometimes.
Fellow prosecutor.
Maybe this is an excuse, so maybe I'm bullshitting myself here. But when I hear an idea, I think part of my pursuit of learning is by challenging it. And that's not always a good thing, especially when it's your girlfriend and she's just trying to tell you something and you're like, no, but logically, and I read this study and I did this podcast. It's like you don't need to interact with people like that all the time.
I make this mistake all the time. And Allison calls me out regularly. She's like, you actually do not need to argue with an idea to understand it. And you don't have to pressure test every single, point that's made. Sometimes you can listen and learn from other people as opposed to duking it out to try to figure out who's right. And I think it's such an important note because in prosecutor mode, you've already concluded that other people are wrong and you're right. So you lose the ability to open your mind. And the same thing happens if you're preaching or politicking. You're basically drinking your own Kool-Aid or listening only to your own tribe and trapping yourself in an echo chamber. And so I got really curious about how do we get out of those modes? What's an alternative? And my favorite alternative is to think more like a scientist. When I say think like a scientist, I do not mean that you need to buy a microscope or, a telescope. I mean that you don't let your ideas become your identity. That you recognize every opinion you hold, it's just a hypothesis. You can test it. Every decision you make, just an experiment. It might succeed, it might fail. And when you do that, it turns out when people can be taught to think more like scientists, when you teach people to see their opinions as hypotheses, their decisions as experiments, lo and behold, they make better choices. They achieve more success because they become more flexible. They change their minds faster. They're quicker to recognize that they're wrong, and that means they're quicker to get it right.
But if Jack had loads of ideas and every single time any idea came out of his mouth, even if it was a good morning, and we all went, Jack, you're so right. It's hard to see how Jack's self-esteem or his ego doesn't take a boost there and him become more committed to being right in the future. Because then imagine if we did that for 1 year as an experiment, then suddenly we turn around one day and go, Jack, what are you talking about? That is wrong. You can imagine his ego, swelling and going, what? So I guess what I'm trying to say is how difficult it is for us to disassociate our self-worth with being right.
Yes. Yeah, a colleague once told me that the worst problem he sees in humanity is the addiction to being right.
Yeah.
And I think it's much more important to focus on getting it right than being right. And one of the ways you do that is you do not let your beliefs become part of your self-concept. So people are like, wait, what do you base? Who are you if you're not what you think? You are what you value. What's the difference between values and beliefs? Beliefs are what you think is true. Values are what you think is important. And I think this is such a critical distinction, because when you start to base your identity, your sense of self, and your ego and your self-esteem and self-worth on what you think is true, then admitting you were wrong is a major threat. Whereas when you start to see yourself as someone who values curiosity or is a lifelong learner, now changing your mind is a moment of growth. So a simple example, before evidence-based medicine, there were a lot of people who called themselves doctors. They'd be like, oh, you're feeling anxious? Let's give you a frontal lobotomy. You think that's an effective way to treat anxiety. That's a belief of yours, right? If that becomes part of your identity, if you see yourself as a professional lobotomist, you are never going to believe the evidence that this is harmful. If you see yourself instead as somebody who helps treat anxiety, and that's your value, the moment you read the careful evidence saying this is not working and it's also really dangerous is the moment you change your mind. And so I think what this means fundamentally is you have a set of principles that you stay true to, but you're very flexible when it comes to your practices and policies.
I'm going to do my very, very best, Adam.
Try it at your own risk.
Yeah, I'm going to try it. Adam, thank you. Thank you for all the work you do, because you forced me to challenge myself over and over again in all the books you've written. But central to all the books you've written is the idea of challenging oneself, which I think is one of the most important messages, which is just this continual pursuit of truth, knowledge, and questioning the status quo and then questioning that. And I think that process of sort of iterative experimentation, that humility, that ability to maintain the student mindset throughout your career is the path to success in both your professional pursuits, but also your personal ones. One of the things that's really helped me in my relationships is this idea of remaining humble to new information and facts. You embody that as a human being, but you embody it in all of your work. And your work is original. And that's why it's so challenging. Something I aspire to in the work that I make is to go to those extra lengths to create wonderfully original work. I sometimes sit on this show and I will recommend someone to go and buy one of the author's books. But in this case, I can't, because I think people need to buy them all. They all offer something so challenging in a very important way. The Hidden Potential is the newest book, right? That's the brand new, that came out in October last year, didn't it? Mm-hmm. But they're all essential books for different chapters and different perspectives and different phases of life. So I'd recommend everybody go buy all three of the books that I have in front of me here, which is the originals, Think Again and Hidden Potential. Get them as a nice little package deal on Amazon, because they are really important books to push your thinking forward. And that's exactly what you've done for me as an entrepreneur. You've pushed my thinking forward. So a huge thank you from myself, but also for the millions of people that have benefited from your work.
Thank you. That's incredibly generous of you. And it means a lot to me considering the source, because you are an original. And one of the things I love about Diary of a CEO is you are constantly challenging people to rethink their ideas and to try new things and unlock their hidden potential. So you're doing what I study on this show, and I think it's amazing. And not anyone can make Malcolm Gladwell cry. I've known him for over a decade. I've never seen him break down into tears before or since. So well done there. Wow. Before we wrap, I have a couple questions for you.
Oh, go ahead.
I snuck a couple in as we were going, but there were a couple of things I was curious about, if you're game.
Why do I feel nervous?
I'm turning the tables here. You should feel nervous.
Isn't this cool? Every single conversation I have here on the Diary of a CEO, at the very end of it, you'll know, I ask the guest to leave a question in the Diary of a CEO. And what we've done is we've turned every single question written in the Diary of a CEO into these conversation cards that you can play at home. So you've got every guest we've ever had, their question, and on the back of it, if you scan that QR code, you get to watch the person who answered that question. We're finally revealing all of the questions and the people that answered the question. The brand new version 2 updated conversation cards are out right now at theconversationcards.com.
Quick one. If you guys have heard me speak on this podcast before about company culture and the secret to building a world-class company, you know that everything starts with people, which brings me to our sponsor on this podcast, which I'm very excited to announce today, which is LinkedIn Jobs. The entrepreneurs and business owners that listen to this podcast, you'll probably want to hear this one, so stay tuned for a second. Whenever I'm looking to hire, my first port of call is LinkedIn Jobs. Throughout all of my companies, this is our go-to method of hiring. And let me tell you why. Firstly, it's super easy. It takes about 5 minutes to create a free job post on LinkedIn. And secondly, you can add a hiring frame to your profile picture, allowing others to know that you're hiring. And lastly, you can set up screening questions, which is LinkedIn's way of helping you to find the best possible candidate that matches your needs. And today, I'm giving the Diary of a CEO community a free LinkedIn job post. Head to linkedin.com/DOAC now and let me know how you get on. And terms and conditions apply. That's a free job post, so go get it now.
First question is, where do you think your hidden potential lies?
I think my hidden potential relies in what you would typically think of more creative mediums like music and theatre and things like that. I think that's where my hidden potential lies. And I think much of the reason I haven't ever pursued it or unlocked it is because I've lived under this limiting belief that I don't have the right to, because my identity says entrepreneur. And
time to expand your identity.
Yes. And also because I'm not as good at it as people that I think of as like musical or, you know, it's only in recent.
You're not good enough yet.
Exactly. And
okay, so you're not Beyonce today?
Yeah, but I can be Beyonce. But if I committed more time to it and I could get over the initial hurdle of the delta between me and Beyonce, maybe I'd pursue it and maybe I'd become it. But I think that's where my hidden potential lies is in the creative things. And I think it's in part because when you've succeeded at something, it reinforces your identity as that thing, and that can trap you in a box.
It can. What's something I can do better as a podcast guest?
Oh gosh,
conversationalist,
great fucking question.
Or writer or thinker or anything.
When I think about great podcast guests on this show, what they do well is they start with stories and then they hit us with some kind of stat, fact, or study to reinforce that, and then they kind of follow with a conclusion. And I can tell in the preamble whether the podcast is going to do well, basically based on that, the way that they deliver their information.
I'll say sometimes I fail on that. I think there are a couple of moments where I started with the data because that's where my energy begins.
Yeah.
Where I could have led with story.
Yeah, I think that would maybe be it. I learned from one of our speakers that the more obscure and surprising the start of their response, obviously the more the viewer leans in. So if I said, for example, if you asked me a question and then I responded with, if I look into your left eye, I can make you fall in love with me. Because it's
immediate logic bully. I don't believe that for a second. Yeah. But I want to hear more.
Exactly. And it's the lean in. And so I was thinking of Dr. Tara Swart, for example, when she came on. She would often start her point with a really obscure, provocative open, and it would make you lean in. Before we started the podcast, I was like, she is going to bang as a podcast. Did the podcast, put it out there, 9 million views on YouTube. She's a smash hit. And then she went on to other people's podcasts, smash it, smash it, smash it, smash it, smash it. And what I identified in the preamble was the way she told stories. You do that well. If there was an opportunity to close the gap from the 9 out of 10 you are to the 10 of excellence, if that exists, it would be just to do that more frequently. Something I'm trying to do. So
thank you. That's enormously helpful and also overly kind. I think part of what you're talking about is what the Heath brothers have called a curiosity gap. Where you put out a puzzle and then it becomes, social scientists actually talk about it as an itch that you have to scratch. Like, I got to know more about that. And that's what leads you to kind of lean in on that. I think that's a great note. And that's definitely something I need to work on. I'm always worried when I go on a podcast that the story is too long and I want to have a conversation as opposed to just an interview. And if I were writing it in a book or if I were giving a talk on stage, I would of course tell the story, but does the story interfere with the dialogue? And I think I need to let go of that because first of all, there's no reason why you can't tell a short story. Mm-hmm. And second of all, some of the best stories take a couple minutes to unfold.
Oh, 100%. I think all the best things are stories. I think it's the way that the brain finds it most compelling to learn. I'm going to have the last question because it's a tradition on this podcast where the last guest leaves a question for the next guest, not knowing who they're leaving it for. So the question that's been left for you, they didn't sign it. That's unusual. What is your first historical rather than personal memory, i.e. the first time you realized there is a big world out there unrelated to you and your friends and family?
Wow. What an interesting question. I don't know if this was the first. It's the most vivid. I think it was 1989. I was 8, and I heard Billy Joel's song, "We Didn't Start the Fire." And I had never heard of most of the references in that song. I was like, what's Studebaker? I knew what television was. I was like, what happened in North Korea and South Korea? And I ended up doing a project, just a personal project, to get the backstory of every reference in that song. And I didn't know it, but that was the first research project I ever did. And I guess it was foreshadowing.
Wow. That is an obscure answer that I wasn't expecting. I was expecting some kind of like world tragedy or something. That's so interesting.
That's the one I remember.
Adam, thank you.
Thank you. This has been a joy and an honor.
Appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Right back at you.
Quick one from one of our sponsors. A lot of you have asked me the question about Huel over the years, about where Huel fits into your life. Is it the most healthy choice one can make when they're thinking about their nutrition? And here's what I would say to all of those people. I think in an ideal world, I would be able to sit down and cook and prepare all of my meals. I think that would be my ideal option. But because of the nature of my life, because I'm moving around often, what used to happen before Huel was I'd end up making bad choices. I'd end up snacking. I'd have junk food options on the go because I was busy, and my nutrition would come second to whatever my professional priority was. What Huel allows you to do is to have a healthier option on the go that is convenient, that contains a lot of the nutrients that you need to have a complete diet. And that's exactly where it fits in my life. They've now expanded the range. If you haven't yet checked out the Huel RTD, I highly recommend you do. Go to your local Tesco, Boots or Sainsbury's, or online, and you can grab and try one there.
You need a podcast to listen to next? We've discovered that people who liked this episode also tend to absolutely love another recent episode we've done. So I've linked that episode in the description below. I know you'll enjoy it. This is the first podcast I've done this year where we had tears, and not just once. And I don't really know how to introduce this conversation. I guess the thing I want you to know is that things aren't always what they seem. And really that humans all feel the same. We all feel the same emotions, the same peaks, the same troughs. And no matter what it looks like on the outside, things aren't always what they seem. I'm Stephen Bartlett, and this is the Diary of a CEO. I hope nobody's listening. But if you are, then please keep this to yourself. Visualization. That's a very relevant word, I think, to start this conversation, because in our last conversation last year, when I asked you what you wanted to be remembered for, what you wanted to do next in your career, you told me that you wanted to have a legacy for getting kids all across this country up exercising and really into exercise, sort of similar to how Jamie Oliver completely changed the way we view like school dinners and things. And I remember Jamie Oliver was the reason I was eating apples instead of Mars bars when I was younger. And then just like a couple of months later, the pandemic happens and you're getting millions and millions of kids in this country up dancing and into exercise. Only a couple months later, it like boggles my mind. I've never seen someone say something so big, such a big ambition, and then only like a couple of months later do it on a scale which nobody has ever done it before.
That's what happened. And I remember when we met and we talked about that moonshot thing, that idea of like having a goal so big and so out of reach that you feel like you can never, almost never attain it. And that was my vision. It was to have that legacy of making an impact, and I do think about Jamie Oliver. He's had amazing success as a chef, as a, an author, but I think about the Jamie school dinners, the man who went into the schools all over the UK and said, look, this isn't enough. Our kids can eat healthier. And I feel the same about school fitness and exercise and PE, not just about obesity and the diabetes thing, but I think about our children's mental health. And I said to you that I want to have a legacy where I can create absolute, national change and national, create awareness around fitness. And, lockdown happened, and within, 18 weeks, that happened. So it was almost like a 10-year dream happened in 18 weeks. And I'm so proud of that I reached that many people.
Take me to the start. So lockdown happens. Where does this idea come from? Like what happens? And then I want to hear, like, when you saw the numbers, the amount of people tuning in every day and the impact it was having, how did all of that feel?
It was an intense moment in time, but it was also something I did visualize, and I had been working on. So I'd been visiting schools. I'd done the UK tour. I went to Ireland, Northern Ireland. I'd visited schools. I'd worked out with hundreds of kids in these schools. That Monday, I was supposed to go on another tour. Me and Nikki were going to take the camera. It's my brother Nikki. And like I've always said, there was no TV show. There was no money. There was no budget. It was just me and Nikki going and doing what we love, which is connecting and, I suppose, reconnecting with the mission and purpose that I have. Because when it's all digital, I do sometimes feel like it's just numbers, and is it real people? So I have to go and visit the schools and actually meet the kids and do it. So on the Monday, I was supposed to go out on the road. We had about 15 schools chosen, and Boris announced, there's going to be this lockdown. So it was 12:15 a.m. I was laying in bed on the Thursday night, and I text Nikki, because I looked at my WhatsApp the next day, and I text Nikki saying, I've got this idea. And honestly, I saw everything. I saw a hashtag, I saw a logo, I saw the name. I said, it's going to be called PE with Joe. Every day next week, do it. Let's just try it for a week, 9 a.m, Monday to Friday. I announced it, and loads of PR, loads of school newsletters, school newsletters were tweeting it, and I was doing ESPN, CNN, like global PR, and I thought this is going to be really big, but still had no idea how many people would tune in on the Monday. And on the Monday we went live. I stepped in front of that camera, and I was really nervous, and 850,000, I think it was, live streams. And I thought, wow, like if you think about how many kids that could possibly be. And then day 2 was the biggest one. So day 2 was 954,000 live streams, which is a world record, it turns out. Yeah, concurrent.
It was almost 1 million people watching at the same time.
Yeah, it blew my mind. And I realised there and then that was like families, that was kids, it was schools, it wasn't like individual people. So really it was probably tens of millions of people a day. And I felt this amazing sense of purpose. Like I was there for people when they needed me the most, because everyone was locked in, whether you had children or not, you were like confined, you felt restricted, your mental health was going to suffer that day. And I was there like to be there and just have fun. And I never once, one thing I was really cautious of, never mentioned lockdown, never mentioned COVID or anything to do with that. It was a safe 30 minutes where we could forget about things. I put the music on, we were dancing around, being really silly. And that was a gift. That was my gift to the world. It was just a bit of laughter, some feel-good energy, and a real boost in their mood. When that finished, I know that they were happier afterwards.
And you must have got a lot of calls from the big sort of production companies and TV companies wanting to like buy it or to bring it to TV, right?
Within a few days. So you remember I told you the story about the Channel 4 thing. I was trying my hardest to make the UK tour thing and a documentary around schools fitness, but they never had the budget, that no one could do it. Well, within a few days, the head of Channel 4, like the top guy, I can't think of his name, called me up personally and said, Joe, what you're doing is amazing. We'd love you to stream the workouts on Channel 4. And I was like, dude, like I'm doing this on YouTube. I've got kids in Sri Lanka and South America and India and like even like Madagascar and the Maldives taking part in these workouts. I can't do this on Channel 4. Like I need to be global. And I'm so glad I stuck with that, because that really allowed it to go global. It allowed everyone all over the world to take part. And don't forget, I was getting 1 million live streams, but by the end of the 24 hours, there was 7-8 million views.
Crazy.
So total 80 million views on the 18 weeks. So 80 million individual views, but how many families or schools are doing that? So it's tens of millions of kids. And that was my dream. So I just can't believe it happened. But I'd built up that trust over 8 years, as the body coach, as Joe Wicks, as this mission-driven person. Anyone could have had the same idea, but maybe they wouldn't have had the same reaction, because, like I said, I've put out so much love and energy and positivity and visiting these schools that those teachers knew I was going to deliver a really fun and safe session for their kids. 18
million people is, when you sat down with me last year and we had this conversation, you said you wanted to do this nationally, right? You said you want to get kids exercising nationally. There's only about 60 million people in the UK. You managed to do 80 million people all around the world on a global level, but also at a time when people really needed that kind of energy the most, at a time when the country was, fearful, people were trapped indoors and not exercising as much as they could have been. So, we can talk about the PE with Joe thing for a long time, but the thing that actually fascinates me more is what happens afterwards. So that goal you set out to achieve, you achieved it quick. How does it feel after?
Well, you talk about that gold medal syndrome, of people having this, like coming off tour or coming back from the Olympics, and they have this kind of feeling of like feeling flat or not depressed maybe, but confused and lost. And that's what happened. I moved into this new house and I thought, I've got this lovely house. Why am I feeling flat? And for the first 2 weeks I was there, I was missing my old house in Richmond because my children were born there. P.E. with Joe was in that living room that you interviewed me in. And it was like this, I left this energy behind and moved into this new life. And I was like, why am I feeling like this? And I realized it was because I'd lost my purpose. I'd been disconnected from that audience every day. So when I felt that, the first thing I do, I jump on my Instagram. Like I said to you, I used to do DMs and voice notes, and I reconnect with the messages. I read the YouTube comments so that I know 2 million people a month were doing YouTube workouts before the lockdown. I'm now getting 6 to 7 million views a month. So that's real people that have changed their habits, that are still doing it. And it reminded me why I did it. And also I had wonderful letters. I had two or three, I'm going to say it's probably nearly like 2,000 or 3,000 like letters and cards and things. That seems mad, but I had this stack of things to go through. So I sat in my office for 2 days, laughing, crying, like feeling this love. It was like this wave of love when I realized what I'd actually done during that time. It wasn't just about me getting kids exercising. It was like widows. It was single parents. It was people with anxiety and depression living on their own. And in all the different places in the world, it was really emotional. So I did feel lost, but I've reconnected with that because now I'm still doing my YouTube workouts. I'm still delivering free content. And although there's this new product and this app coming out, I'm so passionate and committed to doing that one workout a week that I will never neglect that free content and that audience that are there that still may never buy my app or my books.
You talked about buying a new house, probably a bit of a dream come true in many senses. But again, you speak about it being kind of anticlimactical, like it not feeling like that expectation that when you've got that big house, because I've seen the house, it's a nice house. You should have felt like confetti should have come down and you should have felt amazing. But you kind of describe it like you didn't feel that like that.
Yeah, I kind of thought, I was going to move anyway, but it was like the lockdown accelerated because we had paparazzi outside and I wasn't used to that. I wasn't used to having like photos taken of me and India when we walked to the park, and we lived on a main road, so it's quite public, and people would knock and sort of say hello, and it was fine. But sometimes you just want a little bit of privacy, like when you switch off. So we found this lovely house, and it's got a nice driveway, it's got a beautiful back garden. And when I was in there, I just kind of thought, why aren't I double as happy? I've got more space, I've got more garden, but I genuinely felt like I left that part of me behind in that house that was so purpose driven. It was all about P.E. with Joe. It's where my kids were born. So I suppose it's a lesson. And I really talked about that when Boris announced the lockdown number 2, and I'm sitting there in my kitchen, I've got all this space. I'm thinking, it doesn't matter if you've got a massive house or you live in a 1-bedroom flat. We all feel the same right now. We all feel very disconnected, very lonely. We miss our friends and family. We need to socialize. We need events. We need live music. We need dinners. So it's just a really important message that it doesn't matter what situation you're in. We're all feeling the same. And I really wanted to share that message. And it definitely helped people open up the conversation because we're all struggling, mentally with what's going on. And yeah, you've talked about it before, ordering the car and the house. And I think we're driven by these things and consumerism. Like we're always wanting the next thing. But what I've realized during this lockdown is I'm happy exactly where I am with just what I've got. And that's a nice feeling. It's really nice when you realize that another Rolex, another car, even another motorbike or another holiday, it doesn't give you what you really think. And I think people listening that are desperate for that life, I think we all will come to the same conclusion eventually, whether you're 30 or 60, we will all level out and realize that what's important is our friends and our connection and our love to the people around us.
As you say, it took me a long time to learn that lesson, and the phrase that I always come back to.
You're only 27, aren't you?
Something like that.
Yeah, you ain't taking that long. You've got. I think you're very. When I listen to your podcast, I think you've got a lot of wisdom. I think you've spoken to a lot of people, and you've absorbed a lot, and I think you've really take that into your own life and philosophies. I think. Do
you know what I think it is? I've also been really like self-analytical. As in, I will have a thought and I'll have a feeling and I'll try and grab onto it and hold it out in front of me and go, why are you feeling like that? So the day, as you kind of alluded to there, where I realized I was going to be very wealthy and I start looking at cars and houses, I get this feeling of like the feeling you described with your old house, which is, I think if I get this, I'll actually feel poorer in some way. I'll lose something. Like and then I thought to myself, well, if I get this one, what's next? If you get a Lamborghini Aventador, the best fucking sports car, what's next? And then I was like, I'm going to just keep going. And then me realizing that if I always believe that my happiness was somewhere else, in a promotion, in a new car, in a big house, it will never be here.
Yeah.
If I believe that I can't possibly be happy because I don't have X. I will never be happy because once I get X, it's like a mirage or a rainbow. It just moves out further in front of you.
Yeah, and you see that with a lot of celebrities, a lot of musicians, like talented people that get everything so young. You know, they get to that point where they start, you know, they go into depression and anxiety, and it can, you know, manifest in drug addiction or, you know, all kinds of things. But yeah, it's, if you're constantly looking for the next thing or almost living in the past with old memories and what you used to have, like you talk about down contrasting and up contrasting, like that thing you said changed my life. Just thinking, stop thinking about what you did last year, how you went to America and you went to Coachella. Think about what you're doing today and not worrying about that. And it really just brings you to it's like a meditation. It's like a thought, a simple thought where you can actually start to bring yourself back to the moment. And like I said, it could be a quote, it could be a podcast, it could be an interview. Little things, just sometimes it opens up a whole new thought process, isn't it? And you start to think, actually, do you know what? That's amazing. And also, I interviewed Fern Cotton, and she said one of these lovely quotes is, "Nothing in nature blooms all year round." You know, where we're constantly like, I need #1 podcast, I need the #1 app, I need to have, you know, the best book out, everything's got to be #1, I need to be doing everything every month for the year. But I've realised that in nature, like nothing blooms all year round. And that again made me realise it's okay to have quiet months and not be in the media, chill out, relax, because something good will come later on in the year. You'll bloom again during summer. And I think so little things like that really open up my mind. And I'm evolving quickly. I think since I've become a parent as well, you start to be much more empathetic and you start to understand and you feel a lot more when you've got kids. I don't know where it comes from, but I think a lot more about other people's feelings now, more than I ever used to.
I actually wrote down when I was watching your video that you did during the lockdown, where you start discussing your own mental health and you saying, I've just watched Boris's announcement and I'm feeling really shit. But in that video, you also say, I'm feeling shit at the thought that there's loads of families out here that are going to lose their jobs and stuff. And I wrote in my notes earlier on, I wrote, like, incredibly empathetic. Like, you are incredibly empathetic. And it made me question, like, where does he get that from? Because that is a trait I noticed in you last time as well. Most people in the middle of a lockdown, when they've just found out that we're going into our second lockdown, don't think, oh my God, all these other people that are going to lose their jobs. And I could see it in your face. And I know you're a genuine guy because I've been with you. We've gone for dinner, you know, outside of the podcast, I know who you are. I'm like, he genuinely cares.
I think it's grown in me. I think that feeling has grown in me. But where I used to be like, you know, when you're a teenager, when you're a young adult, it's all about you. It's like me. And then you find a partner and you start to realize it's about your partner and it's about your kids. But I think, yeah, like the more I realize that we're all connected, it's that thing of connection, you know, it comes from sometimes a meditation or a feeling of like, we're all in the same experience. And, you know, I've been very lucky. Like the Body Coach brand has grown. You know, my YouTube audience has grown. Like the sign-ups to the plan, it's all gone insane. And so I think about other people and small businesses. I genuinely care about. I think about families that have run like restaurants for 30 years, or had, you know, properties, or had like amazing nightclubs, or, you know, amazing restaurants that are suddenly going under. Like that, it affects me. And that really, when I stop and think about all the pain and suffering in the world, it really brings me down. It really kind of brings my energy down, and then I have to kind of exercise or do something positive because I start to feel a bit sad, because that is the world right now. You know, there's billions of people that are going through a really difficult time. And so my reaction to that is trying to inspire them to move, to eat well, to exercise, because I know that it can counteract any kind of, you know, financial pressures or stress that's going on. If you exercise and you lift your energy and you put good food in your body, you know, even temporarily, you're going to feel better and it's going to change your mind. So that's my gift. You know, I try and inspire people to exercise and feel good for, you know, even if it's once a day or once a week, it's enough to change the way you feel about yourself and your life.
We went for a little dinner a couple of months back. I don't know. I think just after the first lockdown, before the second one. And I came home really inspired on one end, but just, I couldn't shake this thought. And I hate to go back to it, but I couldn't shake this idea that you just had the biggest achievement of your life with this outside of your kids, in my opinion, out with this P with Joe format that just spread across the world, right? And the Joe I met at that dinner was somewhat despondent, as you say, like confused, and as you say, like really unsure about why you weren't feeling on top of the world, and also really unsure about what you do next to kind of like top that, I guess. And it really stayed with me. It stayed with me for like a couple of weeks.
What did you think? Do you think I was going to be more like energetic and proud and like ambitious, or what?
Every person on planet Earth would have thought, okay, so Joe set out to achieve something and he smashed it out the park. He is on all of the TV stations. Congratulations on the MBE, by the way. That's a whole nother
Thank
conversation.
you.
We'll get to
That's
that.
mad, isn't it? Yeah,
That is
can't believe that
absolutely
one.
mad. He smashed everything out the park. He's got to be just absolutely buzzing. We were sat at the dinner and there's people coming up to us asking you for pictures halfway through the dinner as well. But you weren't like that. And even though I've written about this in my book at great length about gold medal syndrome and gold medal depression and my own experiences, I still, when I saw that in you, I was like, fuck, people need to hear about this. Because you were, I'll be honest, right? That was the lowest I've ever seen you.
Really?
Yeah.
I suppose. I mean, look,
I was concerned.
No, I mean, look, I was really looking forward to seeing you, and I was, you know, we hadn't been out for a while, but I think coming off the back of that P with Joe, I was emotionally drained. I think, you know, physically, I can do workouts all day. I've done a 24-hour workout. Like, I can move my body, but I think the energy of performing, like going on stage, stepping in front of the camera when I wasn't in the mood for it, when I had to like pick up I was literally carrying everyone's emotion and energy and and I do believe in energy, that we carry it and we push it, and we sometimes hold negative energy. We sometimes hold things locked up from years ago. And I was just, I suppose, emotionally fatigued at that point. But like, I've bounced back, you know, I'm back in the zone. I'm filming workouts again, and I'm refocused, like I said, on the purpose and the mission, which is like fitness for all. And I've got the app is one option. I've got the books as one option, but then also Instagram, YouTube, you know, there's so much free content, because I don't want anyone to feel like the Body Coach is this premium brand and I can only get to him through that paid subscription. No, I'm still going to give you one workout a week on YouTube, and I'm still going to do my Instagram recipes. I'm still going to share my daily stories and motivate you. And every now and again, I might mention the app, but it really is just like for people that want to give it that extra push, you know, and try something a bit different.
So as we park P with Joe, you know, last time you sat down here, you put out into the world your goal, your ambition, and it came true. So I think, you know, let's tempt fate again. What is your goal and ambition now going forward in terms of your purpose?
Well, I think what happened, I achieved, was a short-term thing. You know, it changed behaviours, but they had to do it because they were locked in. Parents had to keep their kids moving. You know, schools weren't providing PE, everything was closed. So it was a temporary thing. It was the start of a movement, but the legacy is still continuing that movement, you know, continuing to visit schools, continuing to speak to heads. And I don't see it as a government thing, because I've realised that you can actually just speak to local schools and they have the ability to change their curriculum. Well, they have to follow the curriculum, but they can change their timetable. So if they want to fit a 15-minute workout in once a day with their children, or do it, you know, at the end of the day, they have the ability. So again, it's about continuing to grow that mission, to create content, maybe as a separate platform which schools can use. But it isn't over, because like anything, motivation drops. It drops for me, it drops for you, different times of the year. And with young people, they're very engaged at the early ages in primary school. But when they start hitting their teens, they're in the devices, they become more resistant to exercise. So the challenge becomes tougher as they get older. So my mission now is to continue the schools work. When I can, go on the road, start visiting schools again, creating content, you know, hopefully creating a TV show around that. You know, like Jamie Oliver School Dinners was only 6 episodes. In my head, it felt like it was weeks and months of content. So, you know, I want to do the same thing. I want to create a really amazing series, whether it's, you know, Netflix or BBC or Channel 4, where I can continue that conversation to get one teacher or one dinner lady or one head of a school to believe in the power of exercise for their children. So I really feel like I've just started. There's so much more to go.
I think you have as well. And, you know, so like one thing I've learned from doing this podcast and speaking to guests like you is that, and even Eddie Hearn, who we had on last week, is how pivotal and how defining our early years are. And you are like a really fascinating guy in so many ways. We talked about your empathy, your achievements. All of these things suggest that because they're such extraordinary things, or out of the ordinary things, suggest that you probably had quite an out of ordinary childhood. Whenever I meet someone who is achieved out of ordinary things, I always think, okay, tell me about your childhood. So how was your childhood, Joe?
Oh, so you don't think it was a stable childhood? You think there was something a bit more that motivated me on to?
I think, and it doesn't necessarily mean it was like a really bad childhood or a good childhood. I always, you know, and I actually did childhood psychology for 2 years, which people don't know about. This is why I'm so fascinated by like all the Freudian psychology and how one thing that happened, I've got a friend who told me that one thing that happened when he was a kid, he still remembers to this day. And he holds that one comment that someone in his family made to him as the reason for probably his single biggest flaw in his personality. And it was just one comment on one day from a parent.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's the power of, the power of a negative thought. Like if someone says, your teeth are a bit crooked, or you've got skinny legs. Like someone could say you've got lovely teeth your whole life, but you still think your teeth are crooked.
Yeah.
And that's happened to me in the past. Like I got Invisalign because a girlfriend said to me once, your teeth are a bit wonky. Or,
really?
And someone said about, this is a true story. When I was 16, I had glasses, but I was really embarrassed. I was really shy about it. And the girl I was going out with I said something like, I wonder if I'd look good in glasses. And she said, oh no, you'd look silly in glasses. So I never wore them for 2 or 3 years. I used to hide them in my car, drive to her house, take them out. And, it's that thing of, we really take on these thoughts and it can really affect our confidence. That definitely happened to me as a kid. But I suppose my childhood was very chaotic. It was very unstable. My dad was a drug addict from a very young age. So, it was a bit like, he was there 1 minute, next minute he was in rehab, next minute he was back on the gear, and my mum would take him back and it was all good, and then they'd be arguing. And, I lived in a council flat with really thin doors. So it was like plywood. And so there used to be holes in the wall, there used to be holes in the door. Because I remember, I used to think, why are there holes in the door? And I look back now, I know it's because my mum and dad used to fight and argue, and, it'd be like, it was a symbol of aggression and impatience and intolerance, and then it'd be gone. And so I didn't have a positive role model in terms of a male. And also when it comes to marriage, my mum and dad never got married. If they were married, they would have been divorced 100 times. So I had similar beliefs around marriage and commitment to you. Like when I hear you talking about it, like I suppose I had the same feelings when I was 25. I didn't believe that people stay together, that people are committed, that marriage is going to work, that, people get through tough time, because it was always like when it got shit and tough, my dad would piss off and we'd be back on our own again. So, again, it was a tough childhood, but I had a happy childhood. I don't feel like resentment. I don't look back and be like, I wish it was different. I wish my dad was there, because we got a great relationship today. But it definitely affected me, the destruction of drugs in my household and what came with it, all the chaos, really put me off ever wanting to smoke weed or drink alcohol. I was so scared that I was going to enjoy it and I was going to become an addict. I thought it was a genetic thing. I thought, I don't want to be a drug addict, so I wouldn't go near it. So it definitely shaped me, and when I look at where my love and generosity and empathy comes from, it's my mum. Like my mum she's so kind and loving, and she's so always putting other people first. And I think that definitely shaped me as an adult.
I didn't actually know this stuff about you before. I didn't know that you'd been through such a traumatic early childhood. And as you were saying that, I was thinking, fucking hell, it's remarkable that you are who you are and that you have such feelings of empathy, and you're just such a kind human being, having gone through such a, violent and traumatic childhood. And I guess that is credit to your mum.
I suppose, I look back when I get asked in interviews now, like where did your generosity and your kindness come from, and your kind of desire to want to help others? It's about help. I'm happiest when I'm helping others. So if I know I'm helping someone or I'm helping millions, I'm really happy. And so that when it stopped, I felt I haven't got my purpose. I'm not valuable, but I've realized I am still valuable. I'm still helping people. But my mum, she left school at 15, no qualifications. She met my dad in a squat. She had my brother when she was 17. Then she had me when she was 19. She's like a kid. And when we used to go places, like people used to say, is that your sister? She looked so young. You can't imagine. But somewhere along the line, she taught me value. She taught me respect. If I had to be home at 10 o'clock on a Friday night, I was home at 10 o'clock. My mates were down the park till 1, 2, 3 a.m. because their parents let them run loose. And they were the ones graffitiing. They were the ones smoking weed. They were the ones that got in trouble for, crimes and whatnot. So my mum was really, considering she wasn't parented, her dad left her when she was a kid. She was abandoned when she was a baby. So I don't know where her love comes from, but she's got this ability to just love and be so generous. And when she went to university, she went back, she said, I want to study. She went to become a social worker. So the first thing she'd done with her life was go and help people that had, young offenders, people that had been through abuse and all this stuff. So it has to come from her. It is emotional because my mum, so when I took my mum for dinner, the night before it was going to be announced, and I said to her, like, we're celebrating my birthday tonight, aren't we? Because we were having a late birthday dinner, but it's something else.
Your MBE?
Yeah, my MBE. And I said, Mum, I've got an MBE. And we're in the middle of Lucky Cat restaurant in London, and she burst into tears. Really? And I'm like in the middle of the restaurant crying with her. And she's like, when she was younger, like all her friends used to say, you're a fucking shit parent. Imagine the pride. And it's she raised me. Like, I have to put it down to her.
You talked about your dad there, and so you said that you've, after all that you'd been through and all you'd observed and his addiction and his battles with addiction, you've got a good relationship with him now.
Yeah, we do, because, you know, addiction never goes away. Like, he's, you know, he does his NA meetings, it's a part of his life, but he needs that. He needs to have a fellowship and a network of people to talk to. Like, I don't understand addiction. I've never been addicted to anything. So for me, it's like, he needs that network of people he can talk to. And that's obviously at the moment mostly through Zoom, but usually it's like NA meetings. You know, you go and have a talk and you feel better. And he's had therapy, but, you know, he's learned, he's evolved. Like, again, like, his dad left him, and I understand my mum and dad, because they went through so much trauma. My mum was abandoned when she was 2 years old, she was in an orphanage. And then my dad, the same thing, his dad left him. Like, he didn't ever say, I don't think my dad's dad told him he loved him until he was like on his deathbed when he had cancer. So, like, I understand where that addiction, why my dad chose to like do that with his life. And I understand why my mum had OCD, like, because I know what she went through as a kid. I know what she went through as a young teenager. And so you start to understand it, and then you start to really love your parents even more, because they protect you. When you're a kid, they're just protecting you. They can't tell you what they went through. They can't tell you this stuff. So it really like makes you realize how much trauma they've had and where that's manifested. And so now, like, my relationship with my dad is, I understand him. I understand that he has seasonal depression. During the winter, he's really low, and he'll have a holiday and he feels great, and he comes back and he's up and down, and that's him. And I just have to kind of love him. And although I'm quite consistent with my emotions, and you want everyone around you to be happy all the time, didn't you think, I'll buy him a motorbike, I send him to the Maldives, you can go and stay at my house in America. It's all temporary. It doesn't do a lot, you know. So real connection comes from like communicating, reaching out, spending time with him. Like, he's happy when he comes around and we go for a walk, or we go out on our skateboards together. You know, we've got electric skateboards. So it's about reconnecting and being with him. And he needs that. My dad needs to see the grandkids. He needs to see my brothers. He needs to see me. And I've just learned that, like I said, that really nice quote, that the antidote to addiction is connection, not push them away. I hate you. I can't stand it. Why are you relapsing again? Why are you going into depression? You know, the mind's really complex, and you have to like understand that people aren't going to always be how you want them to be, and you have to love them unconditionally. But if you ask me as a teenager, I would be too angry. I would be like, fuck that. No, like, I can't deal with it. I don't have a dad. My dad's a drug addict. I don't speak to him. I wouldn't have had the emotional ability to deal with that. But now, as an adult, I'm 35, and I can understand it a bit more.
So crazy, because I love that quote, by the way. And I think Johanna Hari's a real sort of, I think I've got his book on the shelf behind me about lost connection.
That's where it's from. Yeah, I think Russell Brand mentioned it to me, and I thought, wow, that's such a nice thought.
And that's what the book is about. It's about the real reasons for depression and anxiety fundamentally stem back to a loss of connection of some sort. And it was telling when you were telling your story about the generational sort of cycle that's going on there. Your mother's, your dad and her upbringing, and then your father's dad, and how like it was a lack of connection, it seems, that put them into the situations they were in. And then that lack of connection made them a certain way, which then nearly made you treat them with a lack of connection as well. And I think it seems like much of the reason you're able to break the cycle is because you've realized that. And you're like, as you say, bringing him close, despite, I talk about this a lot with my friends that have an estranged parent or have lost a parent. And I always tell them, I was doing it this week, I was saying, you've got to forgive them for their own faults, because their faults have come from some kind of trauma. And Tony Robbins says it as well. He says, sometimes we've got to forgive our parents for being imperfect, not being the parents we hoped they were.
Yeah, that's so true. It's so true. And like you said, memories can form, like, literally change your characteristics and your personality and your belief system. And I had really negative beliefs around commitment, around, people being faithful, people sticking together, like when things got tough, and even I'd be affected if like celebrities that I really loved, like they'd break up. I'd think, see, that even they can't stay together. I just thought, no one stays together, no one's loyal, no one's ever like actually happily married and stays together. But now, as a married man with 2 kids who I love, I'm really, really like, I don't believe that. I believe that you can be happy. I believe that when I see an old couple on the bench, a 78-year-old couple, I love that. I think how amazing they've spent their life together. I want to be like that. I want to be a couple that are stuck together. So it's, my child has affected my my love and commitment in a relationship to Rosie, but also as a parent. Like, I don't want to be impatient and intolerant and snappy and swear and shout, but that is my default setting. That's what my head's trying to do. When Indy and Marley are screaming at me, I want to slam the door and walk out the house, or I want to scream and shout back at them, because that's what I had as a kid. So I have to actively work against that. So although I might be screaming in my head, I just take a breath and I like almost just sort of just take a moment to just sort of calm myself, and then I can react very differently. But that's like a muscle. You have to train it. because otherwise I'd just be screaming and shouting all day long. You know, so that's definitely, it's hard to do that when you've had it all your life, when you just got, screamed at, shouted at. It's like what you know, isn't it?
Default.
It's your default. Yeah, like it truly is. It's like a computer program, and you have to sort of try and undo that code. And I read a book called Calm Parents, Happy Kids. And it's that thing, you can either fight, flight, or pause and have a breath. You can fight them and swear and shout and scream and slam the door. You can run out of the house and just deal with it and let them deal with it and just not even deal with any emotion and show no emotional control. Or you can pause and have a breath. And that's the secret. It's just having that, right, Indy's 2 years old. Her brain's not rational. She can't understand why I really want to just clean the side and put her down on the floor right now. And so like, you've got to literally remind yourself every time, and then you can start to really respond differently. I guess
kids. We're all human. You have days where you get it wrong.
Oh yeah, I have days. Like, I mean, of course, I have days where I shout and I lose the plot and I feel terrible. But I know that she won't hold it against me. Like the amount of times I was shouted at, I love my mum to death. So it's not like she shouted at me, I think she's terrible and I don't love her for it today. Like, I think it's okay to not be perfect, not be a perfect parent. And the other day I had a row with Rosie and I said, look, I'm sorry I'm not perfect every day. I'm sorry that some days Rosie's my wife.
Your wife.
I said, look, I'm sorry that I'm not perfect. I love you so much. I'm so affectionate and sensitive. But if I'm stressed and I've got something going, sometimes I'm snappy, sometimes I'm impatient, and I don't shout at the kids. I might shout at you, and I'm sorry. And it's nice to say that out loud and have a bit of a chat about it, because then you kind of move on and you can just, get on with it and you learn from it.
You're getting busier, right? With the app stuff you're doing, you're getting more requests than ever before, surely.
Dude, this has been the year, like, I've worked hard, really have, over the last years, and during the growing stage, like with social media, it's hard building an audience. And then I kind of had great success with the books. And now, like, this year, since P with Joe, the 24-hour challenge, I then done Wake Up with Joe, which was 3 workouts a week for lockdown 2, because I thought they need to exercise, people need to move. I've now had the book PR. I've been doing radio interviews. I've done the Channel 4. So the BBC Children Need 24-hour challenge. I've not stopped. Like, I don't know how I'm still going, but I now, at this moment, need more energy than ever, because this is the busy time. This is like leading up to Christmas. I'm also doing a January boot camp. 5 days a week, I'm doing live workouts through the app. Crazy. Which is great, because it means people are going to go, I want to give it a go. And it's a really amazing way of marketing the product, but I'm going to be exhausted.
If you think about your state and your mood and how you feel within yourself in the midst of all this like chaos, and then we've got the pandemic rattling on outside as well, what impact has it had on you? All of this busyness, and now you've got 2 kids, that are growing up and screaming at you and don't want to be put down. Have you felt a change?
I deal with it in different ways. Like, usually I have these like blocks where I'll work for like 2-3 months, and then I go, right, I'm going to go to Santa Monica for a few weeks, or let's go have a nice week in Dubai just to like unwind and leave the phones and stuff. And I've missed that, just that reset button, because I had like a couple of days away just when lockdown was over, but it wasn't enough, because I actually spent my time filming workouts, because I said I was going to do 3 workouts a week. So although I was there relaxing, I'm still there. And what I do is so physical, like, being physical and doing exercise, but also doing it with such an amazing energy through the camera is so draining. But last week has been the most emotionally draining. I was doing like radio interviews with like Jamie Oliver and Ricky Gervais, and doing all these things. It's out of my comfort zone completely. And then I had phone calls every hour on the hour to promote the new book. So that is a different type of emotion. And when we talk about the body coach, so I am the physical body, like the energy, and Nicky is like the CTO, he's the brains, he takes all the things I can't, the process stuff. Nicky's on a laptop doing Zoom calls 9 hours a day, like managing this agency and all the other marketing stuff. So together we have this perfect kind of relationship where we are working as equally as hard, but we're doing what we can do.
Sure.
So I don't feel like burning out, but I do think at the end of January, I need to block a month out. So I've taken the month off, hoping to go, somewhere nice. Like, I love Costa Rica. I'd love to go with the kids.
Amazing.
Just unwind. And basically, when I have that time down offline and I'm not filming, it really re-energizes me. When I come back, I'm like reset and like Body Coach Volume 2, ready to go again, sort of thing.
You talked a little bit there about marriage earlier, and you've also heard me on this podcast talking about marriage, right? I want you to tell me where I'm getting it wrong.
Yeah.
And also why you think I'm getting it wrong.
So I listened to 2 episodes of your podcast, and I really hear myself in you when I was like 25, and I was and I feel like a part of you's lost, because you've got everything on the surface you could possibly want. You've smashed it in business. Like, you've got an amazing story and you've got, incredible success, which is wonderful. But maybe you're missing that deeper connection with one person. You've got amazing friends and you've got a great network of people you work with. But I do feel like the love between one person, it's different. It's a different kind of relationship where you can always lean on them. So when I was 25, I was in a relationship from 19 and I was running away. I couldn't commit to it. I used to say, like, exactly what you were like, this marriage is like this religious thing and it's a contract, and why should that person get half of what I've got, and it's not going to work. All my other friends are unhappy, they're all divorced, 1 in 3 marriages. So the more you tell yourself that, the more it becomes true. And the truth is, how you feel now is how you feel, and what you believe now is what you believe. But when you meet someone and you realize, and when you do fall in love, in whatever sense that could be, it was almost like with Rosie, I was telling her every day I loved her, and it wasn't enough. I needed to tell her more. I needed to have something stronger between us. So I said, can we have a baby? Then she fell pregnant and we had Indy. So for me, in my head, the ultimate bond between two humans is another child. And then when she was pregnant, I never thought I would get excited about the idea of like proposing and getting married, but it just changed. My mind just changed as I started to think, do you know what? I love this girl. I don't want to be waking up, every other week with a different girl in a different hotel. I'm like, that's not who I have been, and it's never who I'll be. So I love being close to one person. I think I'm quite emotional like that. And then I asked her to marry me, and we had this amazing wedding day, and I do love being married. And I just think when you have kids and you start seeing your children grow and you see how wonderful that can be and how much joy they bring you, I just think your perspective will change over time, and you're just not there yet. You might not get that till you're 35. You could be 45. I was 30. I met Rosie at 30.
Okay.
And I've been the happiest since I turned 30. Honestly, I'm committed, because being honest and being committed is two of the most wonderful things. Being sneaky, being deceitful, not being honest, or being jealous and insecure, they're feelings you do not want to go through your life with. So when you find someone, be committed and be loyal. It really takes your love to another level.
Do you believe in the, there's a bunch of words people use in this realm of like love and marriage. They say, you got to find your soulmate.
I don't know if it's soulmate, but everyone says, love's hard work, marriage is hard work. It isn't. It doesn't have to be hard work. Not if you're with the right person. Of course, you could get with someone too young, marry the wrong person, it all goes wrong, and that's a bad experience. But it doesn't mean that the next relationship won't be better and you can't improve and learn from it. But I do feel like Rosie is the kind of female version of me. Like when we met, we were just having so much fun, and she's a wonderful parent. I watch her and I see how patient she is. I think I learn a lot from her, because I've got like a 2 or 3 minute kind of tolerance of Marley screaming in my face, where I just have to walk out the room. I just can't handle it. Whereas she can be in there like 20 minutes all through the night, and I'm like,
the kids,
with Indy crying or Marley teething, and I think it's amazing. She's just got this natural, innate, like motherly patience and love and tolerance. So I watch that and I literally like go, I need a bit more of that, and I sort of learn from it. But yeah, I mean, maybe you might have one relationship that lasts 5 years, but I do believe that when you are in a relationship, like give it all. Don't be thinking this is going to end soon. My last one didn't work out. I know now it's going to break down and we're going to end up breaking apart. We're going to end up leaving each other. She'll have an affair. I'll leave her. It won't work. It's hard to be happy in that situation. So I think take every relationship and just maximize it to the best of your ability, like you would with someone that you work with, a business partner. If we went into business together, you try and make that partnership so like awesome and so effective and efficient. And it's the same with a relationship. You've got to, keep doing the things that make you happy. And yeah, I think with Rosie, like just having a night out, going for dinner, and do you know what the secret is? If you stop kissing, you're fucked. If you don't kiss your girlfriend and you stop kissing, you just bypass each other, and you don't, because everything starts from a kiss. Do you know what I mean? It could become a massage. It could become, you might do a bit of hanky panky, but if you stop kissing, that one thing, that intimacy, I feel like everything breaks down. Seriously, keep kissing.
It's probably the only thing that I've thought about going and seeing a therapist about, is like I have a fairly negative, pessimistic, let's say, perception on romantic relationships. And I think I've identified that on one hand, my expectations are probably like somewhat unmeetable. And then on the other hand, I kind of see relationships as being like a bird in a cage. Is the best way. Where's
that come from? Like, so I know your mum and dad, and they're arguing,
screaming at each other. My parents.
So that's the only marriage role modeling you're basing your opinion on.
Yeah. So I have these, but when I say my parents screamed at each other, I'm like, my mum, I've never seen since a human able to perform the screaming match she did. Nigerian woman, and if you don't know Nigerian women,
I can picture it. I do visualize it like around the kitchen table. And
the
stuff.
sound is like you've never seen. My dad actually said one day, he said, your mum was screaming at me. This is, I think, when we lived in Manchester, probably before I was born. Your mum was screaming at me, and I went out, like went shopping, did all that. Da, da, da. She had no idea. I came back, and she's still screaming. She had no idea that I'd left the house, and the sound of it. I have this like mental image of my dad sat passively, just this like passive white guy just sat there watching TV, just looking at the screen, and my African mother like kind of stood above him, just bellowing into his face at full volume for like 6 hours. She didn't lose energy. We talked about like exhausting yourself. She didn't lose her energy, and she would follow him around the house. And so I looked at my dad and thought, he's trapped. And this is what my
you know, that experience of seeing your mum shout, is that like affected your, you know, your
Yes.
are you calm and you know, when you argue, are you confrontational? Are you like, because me and Rosie are more like silent treatment. We sulk and we're so stubborn, and we'll like go 2 days without talking. We don't scream and shout at each other. Are you quite a shouty person?
I will never shout.
Oh, so you're calm.
Never. I will not do it. I will I will try and explain myself in a very calm way, and then I'm like, okay, I'm going.
Right, and you walk away.
I will like.
Do you ever say sorry? Do you ever admit you're wrong? Or do you find it hard to admit you're wrong?
So if you'd asked me that question 2 years ago, the answer would have been like, no, I never say sorry. Like, because I always kind of think I'm right, and it's like my way or the highway. In the last year, and when I got with this certain person, who I won't name, and she kind of taught me to like grow up a little bit, and I started to apologize for things, and I started to learn to apologize a little bit more. But I've got to be honest, I'm not going to lie. It's like the whole point of this podcast is not to fucking lie. Like, I'm still not that good at it.
It is hard. I'm the same. I find it hard to say sorry in the moment, but I do, if I go away for a little, half an hour, have a walk or do a workout, I do come back and I go, I was a bit disrespectful there, and I do apologize. But yeah, it's an ego thing. It's like, you just got to let your guard down. One thing I'll say about relationships, which I really think is valuable, I can't remember where I heard it or read it, but it was about, you can be in a relationship with someone, and this expectation thing where you want them to do everything perfect and be everything in one and be like this amazing, like just like unicorn, right? But you might find them really attractive and really funny, but intellectually they just don't challenge you. You can't have conversations about what they don't understand you. But you can ring me or Nikki, and you can get that part of a relationship from someone else. So there's no pressure on that person you're with to like be really intelligent and really understand business and really understand social media. Like, that's something I've learned, that sometimes you have to love the person for what they've got. You know, love that they're really affectionate, love that they're really caring and considerate, but maybe other elements of their personality you have to get from someone else, because the chances of you finding the unicorn is so rare, isn't it?
Oh
that you're going to find that. And also you might be amazing at certain things, but you might not be good at one thing.
Yeah, I'm not a unicorn. This is the problem.
Who is a unicorn? No one's a unicorn, really. No one's completely perfect, because when you're in a relationship, you want the other person to like, you know, do everything like you and it be interested in the same things you like. Rosie's not into, you know, motorbikes, but I go out with my brother and my little brother George and my dad, so I kind of I scratch that itch, and I come back and then I spend time with Rosie and the kids. So it's really about finding the needs that you need as a human being in maybe in multiple people, and then you can really just focus on what you love about your partner. It does help.
You talked I talked a little bit about going to therapy. Have you ever gone to therapy? So this week I had my deadline for my book, Happy Sexy Millionaire, which you can now pre-order. And it's been an absolute labor of love over the last couple of years. And because I had the deadline, on Sunday, I was head down, smashing it out. Typically, like me, forgetting to eat my meals and things like that. And this is where Huel saved me once again. And I was in my office until 6 a.m. in the morning. I was getting very, very tired. I'd had 2 Huels, and I had dinner as well. And for me, that was the reason why I've teamed up with Huel, because someone like me in that situation would basically either completely skip meals, I would not get my sort of vitamins and minerals, I wouldn't get protein, then I'd start feeling like shit, because I didn't have the time. And that's, as I've said on this podcast before, the reason I'm so attached to Huel, the company, the brand, the founder, Julian, because it really does save my ass, and it has done for 3 years. And if you are someone like me, you know, that does have a very time limited life, then I really, really recommend you give Huel a shot. I really recommend you give berry flavor Huel a shot, because that is my favorite flavor. And so this week I just wanted to shout it out, because you definitely saved me on Sunday when I had my book deadline. And also go and check out my book, Happy Sexy Millionaire.
It's quite nice. It's like Nesquik, isn't it? It's like yeah, it's nice. I do like that.
I talked a little bit about going to therapy. Have you ever gone to therapy?
I call it the gym, but yeah, I think my therapy from a kid, and I look back, like for sure, like I was stressed. I didn't want to go home. I would be always out the house, always playing sport. I think it was my therapy, and I dealt with things through sport, and maybe that's why I became the body coach. But I think I had one therapy session with a counsellor once because I was basically in a relationship that I didn't want to be in, and I needed to talk to someone about it. And I had that session, and I just spoke and verbalized everything I was going through. And it was almost like, just by saying it, I was like, I know I need to walk away from this now. And I went home, and that was it. So it was an investment. It was like an hour of my time. I spoke to someone, because it wasn't my mum who was invested, my dad who was invested. It wasn't her parents and my friends who really cared about her. It was like a completely neutral person. And it really helped, because it changed the direction of my life, because I left a relationship I wasn't happy in. I met Rosie, I got married, and I had kids. You know, and this is the situation. Like, I was 19 when I met that girl. I was backpacking. I was in a bar in Australia. You're very different 10 years later. So maybe there can be such thing as a relationship that's really great at a certain time in your life, but then when it's not right and it isn't working, having a child and marrying that person is definitely the wrong thing to do. And I didn't really realise that until I met Rosie, just how unhappy I probably was in that last relationship. So yeah, I've had it once, and I think if I feel like I need it, I'd be open to it. I've got a lot of friends that do it. It's like, I see it as like personal training for the mind, isn't it? It's like, why not? Why not take care of your brain and your heart and your mind? And that can be done through therapy. So I'm open to it. I just haven't had the calling. I'm more interested in, I really like the idea of doing an ayahuasca ceremony.
Can we do it together?
Do you know why? I listen to your podcast. I listen to like certain people that do it, and I'm drawn to it because of that gateway and opening up that even more love and more connection, when you realize we're all so interconnected. And obviously you can meditate for 10 years, or you can go and do an ayahuasca ceremony, and apparently it's like a fast track to that feeling. But yeah, you've talked about it. Have you, I mean, I was in Mexico in Tulum, and they were doing like peyote ceremonies out there, and I just couldn't quite convince myself to do it. But I would love to do ayahuasca one day, like go proper into the Amazon, do it properly with a shaman, and like, you know, feel that mother nature that they talk about, that feeling of like the earth and that are connected to the human race. It must be a wonderful feeling.
Have you ever done mushrooms?
I've never done mushrooms. No, I've never done drugs, so I couldn't really.
I've never done anything like that. I've never done mushrooms or ayahuasca. But I've just invested almost $1 million into a psychedelics company that's using it to cure mental health disorders. We talked about this, didn't we?
Yeah, for the psilocybin. So my dad was involved in the trials at the Imperial College London. He's involved. He was basically one of the. Not the guinea pigs, but yeah, it was a trial between psilocybin, a placebo, and an antidepressant drugs. And obviously the studies come back that like this can really help, and it's a natural product from the earth. So yeah, I can see that growing in the next few years for sure when it gets approved. Has it been approved in the US for like
Yeah, so it's in the
depression and stuff?
Don't quote me on this, but it's in the final stage of FDA approval, psilocybin. So it's very, very close. And there's a company called Compass Pathways, which has just gone public and is, as of right now, worth about $2 billion, which is really is sort of leading the pack in developing psilocybin. But it's crazy that I've not tried it, but I've looked at all the research and development videos and studies and data, and it like blew my mind. Are you
tempted to try it yourself? Are you scared and nervous about it?
No, because I know the numbers. I've looked at every drug, and I've seen where mushrooms and psilocybin rank in terms of the harm they could possibly do to you and the harm they can do to others when you're on them. It's below alcohol. It's below it's at the bottom. It's the bottom thing on the list.
Yeah, it's been shown to really help with addiction and depression and trauma from that. So yeah, I suppose I wonder what the experience will be like for us who maybe we're not depressed and we're not anxious. I wonder what that experience will be like. But yeah, you know, I listen to a lot of podcasts. You know, Tim Ferriss is big on it. Rogan, you know, and yeah, it's just kind of, it feels like this scary thing, but I suppose because it's been going on for thousands of years, you know, with kind of tribes, and it's not some dirty chemical drug that's been manufactured in a lab. I think
it's non-addictive.
It opens up. So what they say is it opens up like neurological pathways that maybe is all these memories locked. Did you hear the Tim Ferriss podcast? He said like he'd done an ayahuasca ceremony, or maybe it was psilocybin, and he had this vision of trauma that came through that he completely blocked out.
Really?
Yeah. So he experienced child abuse. Like he literally didn't remember it, and he had this vision and all these memories of being abused, and it like completely like opened up his mind. He's now obviously sharing about it, but that was like so it's quite in a way, you don't know what you're unlocking. You can unlock really beautiful memories and amazing things, but it can also show you like quite traumatic, upsetting things. But either way, like you can learn from it, I think.
Do you know what I did this morning is the founder, one of the founders of the company, a Thai, which is leading the charge in terms of psychedelics. They're really developing about 10 different compounds in the space. I said to him, I need to get you on this podcast. Would you come on? And so he's as far as I know, he's an incredibly successful biotech guy. He's been doing it for decades, and he's going to come onto the podcast and really talk through all of these things. So like ibogaine and psilocybin and all of that. So that'll be
that'd be interesting. Yeah,
fascinating.
I'll be listening to that one. Yeah,
but listen, ayahuasca, mushrooms, psilocybin, if you want to do it, then I've been saying to all these people in this room now, I've been saying, let's go and do a retreat with like a shaman. And they've told me what the best way to do it is, like the best retreat, the best shaman, the best place. I'd love to do something like that.
Yeah, I would be up for it. I mean, it's a real it's like personal growth. Like you read a lot of books. I'm not well read. I wish I had more patience and more time. And I wish I had more commitment and discipline to reading, but I'm drawn to it, and it almost they say like it will call you. Like my dad's done an ayahuasca ceremony in Wales, and he said it just calls you, like the plant, Mother Nature, like you'll have a calling one day and it'll be like, I'm ready. At the moment, we're just sort of experimenting with the idea of it.
And your dad did the psilocybin trial with Imperial, so what was his feedback to you after he did it?
Yeah, I mean, it was it sometimes takes a little bit longer to integrate. You have the experience, and it was in a very controlled room, like it's in a proper like clinical setting, so you're like in a hospital room and they're holding your hand and talking you through it. And I'm not sure the exact dosage, but he got blasted with a decent dose of psilocybin, and he saw some things, and it unlocked a little bit of trauma and some visual stuff that he saw. But again, it's just about moving forward. It's about taking what you see and integrating into your life and saying, I've had these experiences, but how can I be present today? How can I enjoy my life today? And with depression, I don't think it's going to be cured. I don't think you can cure it like that, because of the way the brain works, but you're going to learn to deal with it and spot the signs and kind of counteract it quicker. But yeah, he had a positive experience for sure, and he's really proud that he took part, because he genuinely wants to help people. Like he said, if people can come off chemical antidepressants and be given a really beautiful natural natural product that can actually help them feel happier, and especially for like post-traumatic stress disorder, like people dealing with some really, really hard stuff, and they're getting blasted with, antidepressants, which are very addictive. And it's like morphine, isn't it? It's like, it's not even like good for you. They're very addictive as well. I don't think you're going to get the same thing.
Yeah, the side effects are really, really, crazy sometimes.
I think they're opioids. Is it opioids or antidepressants? I think antidepressants are like opioids or amphetamines. It's one of them. It's basically the drug that, you do not want to be taking in a very small dose, but over time it can generate real addiction. And you see it in America, like the prescription drug addiction over there is really destroying people's lives over there.
My next question, you would have heard this on the podcast if you listened to the Eddie Hearn one. It's kind of a new question I'm asking, and it's a question I really, really love, because I think it gives a unique sense of perspective. You're an incredibly busy guy. You're running around at the moment doing this, that, and the other, all over the place. If you found out, God forbid, touch glass, that this week was your last week, for whatever reason, God forbid, or you walked out here and you got hit by a truck, what would you regret having not done or not doing more of?
I really wish I had like this long list of bucket things that I wish I'd done, but I've always, even when I was at university, like I would go traveling in my half term, my summer holidays. I've always maximized life to the at that moment in time. I've never regretted or like missed out on things. I've always traveled with my friends. I've always, done the things I want. So if I had a week left on earth, I wouldn't really regret anything. I'd be proud. I'm proud of what I've achieved in this short time. I'm 35. I feel like I've been good. I've done some good things. I'd probably bring everyone together and like throw my wedding party again, because my wedding day was wicked. Like I had all, your best friends and all your mates, and we had a fun fair and we had all the food and we were dancing. And I think I'd try and recreate that. If I knew I had 7 days, I'd get everyone together and say, look, it's my last week. Come down, let's have another blowout and have a party. But I wouldn't regret. Yeah, I just really wouldn't. I think it's a shame to live your life like that, regretting and wishing your childhood was different, wishing, I've got friends that kind of live in that mindset of always looking back and almost thinking about a moment in time that if they just done it differently, they were like, life would have been different today. But you can't think like that. You can't get stuck between the future and the past, can you? Because that's really, really depressing. Whereas if you actually just think, look, I've done what I've done, even the bad things and the times I wasn't nice or disrespectful, like I learned from it, and today I'm a better person for it.
a lot of people, when you ask them that question, they reflect on like a lack of balance in their life. They'll say, oh God, I work too much. And I didn't see the kids enough. And those kinds of things. That's typically what you hear. It's like, oh, do you know, I really wish I'd spent more time with this person or that person. I think if I was to answer that question, I'd probably say that. I'd say, why didn't I spend enough time with my family?
I think the reason is because most traditional businesses, like if you're a grafter like Eddie Hearn, always on the road, always around the world, footballers, again, away every weekend, they're training, they're, traveling the world, musicians away from their family. And it's hard for stability. And so they do sacrifice a lot for that fame and success. Whereas my fame and success has come through an iPhone in my kitchen. So I've really, even before lockdown, I filmed all my workouts at home. So I have a great balance where I can do what I'm doing and be successful, but also leave my phone for 2 weeks and go away and not worry about it. Or I can, put my phone down. Like I spend quality time with my kids every day. Like I'm adamant about that. So I do, breakfast. I make them breakfast every day. I have 2.5 hours. So between like 5 and 7:30 where I don't have my phone, and I do dinner time, bath time, but story time. Like I love it. It's like my routine. And I know once they're down, I can go back to work or, watch a film. But it's having little moments like that, just having that structure so that you don't feel like you've missed out, and you ask them how their day's been. And Indy's favourite thing is like, she loves cooking and she loves doing her handwriting. So even just running in there and doing 10 minutes of handwriting with her. I mean, she's 2 years old and she's doing the alphabet. She's got like these dots, you follow the dots. And just seeing her with a shaky hand to like now a month later, she's banging out the A to Z and it's like immaculate. That's fun. It's amazing. So I'm not missing out on these moments. Although I'm really busy, I'm also optimizing my time with them as well, if you know what I mean.
When you said that India's really into cooking, I thought, oh God, she's going to be the next body coach. And then I thought, oh God, I wonder if Joe would want her to be on social media.
Oh, I don't know. I had this dilemma with Rosie, when I was bringing out my cookbook, my Wean in 15 book. So I got a book deal and I was genuinely enjoying that journey. I was learning to wean Indy for the first time. I didn't know what to do. I was working with a nutritionist, and I shared so much. We got 50,000 pre-orders, and I worked hard for them pre-orders because I shared everything. I shared the dinner. It was camera at breakfast. It was camera at lunch. It was, Indy, do you like that, darling? Do another one of them. So I shared so much in order to have that success. But now I've just gone I just don't want the phone out during dinner time. So I'm producing less content. I'm not producing as much recipe stuff because I want to have that time just with us. And I used to just film every gusto recipe. Every recipe was on Instagram. So yeah, I've had to sort of step back a little bit, and there's no way you're going to keep your kids on social media. It's just whether they're 10 or 15, they're going to eventually get it. But
would you like to though, if you could? There's two buttons in front of you. One of them was she won't join social media until she's 21. And the other one was she'll join at 10.
Oh, 100% no. If I could have my life without social media, like I have an unhealthy relationship with it. And I watched The Social Dilemma on Netflix and I was like, I cannot believe how addicted we are, how these devices are so well designed. I wish me, Rosie and the kids weren't on social media, but I know I wouldn't have been the body coach. P. Joe wouldn't have happened. So it's almost this like,
trade-off.
It's like a trade-off, isn't it? It's like if you want to have this success and have this amazing life and also reach millions of people, the only way you can do that is social media. It's not TV, it's not radio, it's social media. So it has its pros and cons. But I hope that we can somehow learn to control this mental health epidemic that we've got going on with social media and the narcissism of Instagram. I just hope that we kind of go, actually, you know what? That was cool in 2010 and 2020, but maybe now let's be more humble. Let's just be kinder and let's share useful content. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, because India, she's gonna get her phone. She's gonna open it on that first day when she's 10 years old, and she's gonna see Kylie Jenner in a bikini on a yacht, in a Louis Vuitton bikini on a massive yacht, looking back at it with her ass looking perfect and perfect boobs and a perfect face and perfect hair. And India's gonna stare down into that phone and think, okay.
Yeah, what's my life? Yeah, and it is, and it's that comparative thing, and it happens to me. Like I follow a lot of Instagram accounts, and my explore page is basically like motorbikes or it's fitness models, and it's like because I'm in that kind of atmosphere and that world, and it does. You think, oh, these guys are in such good shape. I'm looking a bit skinny. I'm a little bit podgy at the moment. Like whoever you are, you still start to compare yourself.
Oh God,
it affects your confidence, whether you know it subconsciously or not. And, I'm like, I wish I was more tanned. I wish I was on holiday. I wish I had a bit more muscle this. I wish I wasn't so skinny, or I wish I didn't have a little bit of body fat on my tummy this year, because you're just bombarded with these visual representations. So, yeah, I think that in that effect, it almost like you can't really stop that. if you're looking at it all the time, you can't. It's almost like you have to just unfollow some of those accounts. You said, didn't you? You said like unfollow the accounts that don't serve you.
Yeah.
And I've started doing that. If I get to one, I go, why did I follow that? Bang, unfollow.
Do you know what it is as well? So I finished my book now, but when I started writing the book, people are quite crazy at the time. The title's Happy, Sexy Millionaire. And in this one chapter, I really focus in on comparison. And this is a bit of an exclusive. And I go through all of the studies on why we compare ourselves to other people and why we compare our car to someone else's car. And the conclusion I came to is we're not actually going to ever be able to stop comparing because our brains are wired that way for survival. That's how our brain works. It's very, very lazy. If you show someone 3 TVs in a shop, an expensive one, a middle one, and a cheap one, statistically, people will pick the middle one.
Oh, really?
Because they think that one's going to break and it's shit. The cheap one, and they think the expensive one is maybe too flashy. So if you show them 3 steaks on a menu, statistically, people will pick the one below the most expensive one.
Yeah, do you know, even I actually, when you come to say that, I sort of feel the same. Like, I'll be like, I don't need that, the Wagyu one because I'm happy with the £20 one in the middle or whatever. Yeah, you're right.
It extends across everything. If I said to you, Joe, would you rather drive 10 minutes to save £10 on a £200 jacket or drive 10 minutes to save £10 on a £20 jacket? People go, well, I'll save the £10 on the £10 jacket. And they go, why? It's 10 minutes it's going to cost you to drive and you're going to save £10. But your brain is just assume it's like the conclusion
what's the sum and what's the conclusion? So I'm interested in that because I'd like to know what you're sharing about that.
The conclusion is that our brains are so lazy. They make such lazy snap decisions and conclusions because those snap decisions helped us to survive when we were 10,000 years ago. A lion's running towards you. You can't fucking you've got to just so our brain does it at super speed. And in the context of social media, it's like, I loved my Nokia phone.
Yeah.
Until
the new one came
out. iPhone comes out, right? I was the proudest kid in school, showing everyone look, Snake. I can do Snake on here.
Yeah, back in the day.
But then the minute that same thing, which hasn't changed in value, exists in a world of iPhones, which is what social media is. It's like me looking at Kylie Jenner immediately, even though I haven't changed in value, I am less than. Yeah. Our brain tells you.
No, I agree. I agree with that. And I feel that myself sometimes when I watch that show, the Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma, it did say all of the guys that created the products, that created the like buttons, all those people said, my kids aren't on social media.
Yeah.
And that's the alarm bell. It's like saying,
Crazy.
It's like that joke of, I wouldn't trust an eye surgeon who's wearing glasses. Like, I'm getting my eyes lased on Saturday, by the way.
Oh, really?
But like they say, if that person that created it and that does it every day is saying to you, like, get your kids off social media, it's not good for their mental health. And that is what it is. It's not about... I don't think it kills ambition. I think it just really affects people's mental health.
And their self-esteem.
Yeah. And sometimes that's irreversible. And you could be like a young teenager that has an eating disorder, all through your life or is binging or under-eating or, not respecting your body. And that can really stem from like how you feel about yourself, right? So I try and use my social media to obviously promote healthy food and fitness. That's a positive part of social media. And I think your content's positive. I think some of the quotes that you share, like the 10 things and like all these little, sometimes I read when I go, bang, wow, like it's just a nice little light bulb moment. So you're using it for positive, and we have to just always focus on that, focus on the people that are bringing the good stuff out of it.
I think you've probably heard me say before that the way I use my Instagram, I genuinely believe has like saved my life a little bit, because I would have before, if you scroll down my Instagram right now, you'll see what I was like. Oh, picture of a Lamborghini, picture of a Louis Vuitton bag. And then at some point when I became a CEO of a company and I felt a sense of responsibility not to be that guy, I thought, okay, so how can I use this? I'll post quotes. And because I've done that for the last 2-3 years, it's meant that when I do have, it means that I don't buy stuff to post it.
Yeah.
And if I'm in a helicopter going over Sri Lanka, sat next to my girlfriend, which I was, no one will know because I actually don't have a place to put it.
Yeah.
So I'm now making decisions.
Unless you're on your close friends list. That's
close friends?
deep. Yeah. I'm so glad I'm on that. That's why I get so nice villas.
Yeah. There's only 100 people on there. But I don't have a place to put it. And so when I'm making the decision, it's not based on social media, because I know I'm not going to be able to tell really anybody other than a couple of my close friends. My question though, which is kind of attached to that, is about money. Something that a lot of people probably won't talk to you about. Now listen,
it's always uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable.
It's like, it's just awkward. Even when articles come out like Joe buys this much, this £1 million house, it's like, why is that important? But I just know that people are obsessed, aren't they? So ask what you want to ask and I'll be honest.
Yeah, so an unavoidable consequence of success. Like, the thing is, the reason why I'm actually not uncomfortable about asking you this question is because if there's anyone on planet Earth, on, off camera, that I know has the most genuine, sincere intentions, it is you. Probably of all the people I've met, I'm like, I can't think of a guest I've met who is more sincere about their intentions. More.
Oh, thank
right?
you, Stephen.
Your maximum sincerity, right? So some people are as well, but your maximum. So I've got no problem asking you this question, which is an unavoidable consequence of your success over the last year previously is money, right? It's what allows you to have a camera to do PE with Joe, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, definitely.
So this year, I mean, you've made a lot of money, right? Like every year. What role does money play in your life? Just be honest with me.
It's that thing of, we talk about, freedom of time and like, owning. Yeah. Like I've always been about time and being with friends and family. So for me, it's like, it's removed a lot of stress. Cause when I was a kid, I remember money was a stressor. Like we had, we never had food in the house. So my mum would have to go to my nan's and we'd have to get like borrow pints of milk and like running next door. When you're on a council estate, it was quite common. You'd go and ask for a pint of milk or a couple of, I remember asking for like a bag of sugar for our cereal and stuff. So I didn't have any money growing up. And, I was on school dinners, my mum was on benefits. So it was all like Iceland, 2 for 1, buy and get them free. It was crap food, and that affects things as well, the food you're eating. But I suppose, for me, when I started to make money, it was a gradual thing. I didn't win the lottery and wake up with £1 million. I released my online plan and 1 person signed up, and then it was 10, and it grew, and it was gradual. And so it was a nice way of, and like with my followers, it was a nice gradual thing. I didn't just jump off of Love Island with 2 million followers and have money thrown at me. And I think that does affect your ego differently. And I think anyone that's young that gets thrown into the media with money and fame, it would affect you in a certain way. So it definitely allowed me to have more freedom and to take care of my family. I think I'm not someone who has been successful and left people behind. That would make me seriously unhappy. I've helped my brother out. I've helped my dad. I got my mum a house. We've done amazing holidays together, like with all the boys. They know I'm there if they need me, and that's a nice feeling. But yeah, the question is around motivation around money as well. I feel like as time's gone on, I've become less motivated by it. And I remember that story you said about you're up here and you could have run downstairs and sent an email and got 20 grand. I have days like that too, where I think I could go and do another Gusto post and 10,000 people might sign up, or I could go and film another workout and it could get 2 million views. And and when I feel like that, I have to remind myself of like why I do what I do, and that mission thing about there's someone at the end of that YouTube video just waiting for a new workout, and they live in Scunthorpe and they've got no money and they're proper skint and they're waiting for the workout. And I remind myself of that. So yeah, money allows freedom. It's less stress, and money was always something we always argued about. I think maybe my marriage, I'll be honest, is easier because we don't argue about money. And maybe your mum and dad used to argue about money, like school uniform, the new trainers you wanted, the school trip you wanted to go on. Like, I remember like going on a school trip was really hard for my mum and dad. We couldn't afford to do the school trip sometimes. And, they would always work really hard, and it would, sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't. So I think having a bit more money in the bank means there's less pressure on you as a person, and therefore you can go through life a bit easier. But
I had to overcome, as we talked about kind of earlier, I had to overcome that feeling though, like that, shit. If more money isn't going to have an impact, then what the hell are we doing, Steve? Like, what are we doing here? Because, 16-year-old Steve told me money was the whole game. You get more of it, you get more and more happy. It's just like that. Your happiness goes up with your bank balance.
Your ego inflate, because I can imagine when you said about, I used to go to like China White and Punk and like, Studio Valbon and that. And I never had money. I was skint. I was a university kid. I had like 20 quid in my pocket. I'd be in there on a freebie. But I imagine if you had money at that time, you'd be the one with the bottles spraying it about and all the lights and all the girls coming with the big flares. Is that what you were like? Did it inflate your egos? You
Do you know what?
Spend more money?
And I've got to be as self-aware as I possibly can be here. I don't think it's ever had an impact on my perception of myself. However, I genuinely feel the same opinion of myself as I always have since I was 3. Like it's never changed.
But I bet people around you changing, like, because they knew Steve had the dough and you would, and all the girls would come over.
I was rolling into clubs and spending. I remember this one club in Manchester called Neighbourhood. They had this little star next to my name because I was like the #1 spender, and I'd walk in there and get 5 bottles of Dom Perignon. I didn't think I was anything else, but I was still doing it. Like that's a really important point to make. Like you hear about these rich assholes and these like young kids that like they get all this money, then they start treating people like shit and they change change. All of my friends say to me, you haven't changed at all.
Yeah, you just.
I was still doing it.
I suppose you were like the facilitator. You were the fun house.
Exactly.
You brought people together, and you could have the fun. And I think, you know, maybe if I had a bit of money at that time, maybe I would have done those things. Because I do. I mean, my thing now is going to nice restaurants. I love going to like Zuma or Nobu and having a meal with my friends. I didn't have that kind of flashy kind of like nightclub vibe. But, you know, at the time, the thing is, at that time, that was what you wanted to do at that time. You don't do it now. And I think if you had fun, like, it's good. It's all good. But yeah, money.
I got out my system.
Yeah, get out your system.
And it's weird because I'd looked at those people in the clubs and I'd looked at rich people and thought, oh God, like, yeah, when I become one of them, then I'll be super happy. So then you go and do it. I went and got this massive fucking mansion in the countryside and I'm sat there like, nope.
Yeah.
Spray the bottles for a year and you're getting all the bottles for a year and you're like, okay, nope.
So when you exited and you know, or even before that, you've been financially secure for a long time. Has your motivation dropped or increased? Because I at the moment, I'm feeling quite demotivated, but I'm more excited by the legacy and the potential of like building the body coach to a point that in 20 years time, I can look back when I'm a bit older and go, I started that, I created that company, you know, that's still going. Did you find yourself
really good question.
Lost motivation because you were like, you know what, I can chill now. I ain't got the hustle in me anymore.
Mate, it's a really good question. And again, I've been writing a lot about motivation lately, so I think I've got a pretty good answer to this. You know, one of the best sort of easiest answer to this question is just referring to my gym routine. I think you might have heard on the podcast, I said in one of the episodes that every February and March, I'm the most motivated person on planet Earth to work out. And I say to myself, I'm going to have a great body for summer. And then summer comes, I drop the photo on social media, summer ends, and I literally can't bring myself to the gym because my motivation, my why, was anchored to a timeline, which is
to look good in summer
and looking good. And so the minute I post and everyone likes it, it was like, I genuinely couldn't get myself to the gym. And I was going like 2 times a day before. Really? And this relates to our other motivations in other parts of our life. Like when you lose the anchor with your why, which is what you described after P with Joe, you've got to fucking find it again. It's like the gold medalist. You've got to go and find it again. And you've got to re-anchor yourself to something that hopefully doesn't have a short-term timeline against it. Gary Vaynerchuk says the same thing. He says, the worst day of my life will be when I buy the jets. It's been his...
Yeah, that's his thing, isn't it?
It's forever.
It's his moonshot. And I didn't hear that before. That term moonshot is nice because it's like, Joe,
big.
Don't just do something you know you can do in 6 months.
Yeah.
Do something you think will take you 20 years.
This is what the conversation we had, right?
Yeah, that's what you said. And I went home and I was thinking the same. I said to Nikki, I said, I love that. I love that idea of a moonshot. What's our moonshot? And he's like, well, our moonshot is that we build the body coach and we have an exit so that someone comes along and buys it and it continues to flourish for years to come. Because otherwise, it's like Mr. Motivator, smashed it in the 80s or 90s, whatever it was. And I would have just been the body coach, the Mr. Motivator of this time, but unless I build it to sell and I build it to sustain itself and grow and continue to help people. And that's really where my head's at now. I think I've had a shift in my mentality towards that.
But I did lose motivation at several parts of my life. And it was always, as I described with the 20K in the email downstairs, it was when I was doing things without that real intrinsic deep sense why. So before Social Chain started, I had no motivation to do any marketing for anybody or to send emails to anybody. And then Social Chain starts and I'm going to the fucking Ukraine at 3 a.m. in the morning. I spent 11 of the 12 months last year in hotel rooms, happy, driving for this mission of building this company with, super key thing, with people I loved.
Yeah.
Right? Because it didn't have to be social media. We had a purpose. We had a worthwhile goal. I was working with people I loved towards that worthwhile goal. And I felt competent in doing so. And if you have those 3 things, like competence, a worthwhile goal, and you're working with people you love. And lastly, I'd say a sense of control, like autonomy, because a lot of people we have that in our lives. A lot of people working in factories and other industries don't have that feeling of autonomy over their time. And
have you got the hustle now? Could you like go back and do the 11 months on the road suitcase? Because I remember you used to always be in an airport, always rolling that little wheelie thing around. I thought it must be like, no matter how much money you're making, no matter how much money and how much you're building, there must be an element of loneliness and like exhaustion where you think, I just need to be like settled in one place. And now you're in London. Do you think you're sticking about or are you going to hit the road again?
Great question. And it's something I've reflected on. If you told me now to fly to the Ukraine and do a talk, I'd be like, fuck off. I've said this to my assistant the other day. I said, I can't understand where the motivation came from. And it's because I've lost it. I've lost the anchor. I've quit Social Chain. So when I, even with this mindset, I think, go to the fucking Ukraine and do a talk at 9 a.m. to a bunch of people for an hour. Okay, fuck off.
Yeah, you lost it.
I've lost it because I've quit. So my anchor's gone and I can't even get myself back into the mindset. However, I will get my anchor back at some point.
Yeah.
And I'll find something else and I'm not trying to find it at the moment.
Yeah, it's nice to slow things down. I think the lockdowns helped us just think we don't need to be on this hamster wheel all the time. Like, it's all right a few months of the year, like you said, nothing in nature blooms all year round. Like, you can have a couple of quiet months because your event didn't happen. I really wanted to be at that event in Manchester, but I'm hoping that happens. I need to come.
There's going to be moments. Huge.
Yeah, I know. I mean, like, really mate, you showed me the music. Me and Nikki got mad, like, goosebumps just listening to the music you're going to play. But yeah, you've got loads ahead of you. I think it's important to just have these months where you go, I'm not everywhere at the moment, but I know in 6 months I've got this great project and there's your moment to bloom. And that's kind of where my head's at now, rather than like, come on, what should we do now? Let's do another this. Let's do more of this. I'm like, it's okay to be not busy and not be successful for a few months.
And to create a void in your life. This is what my mentor said to me. I think he was one of the first investor ever in Spotify. He said, Steve, I met him after I resigned, and he said, Steve, listen, it's so tempting to just sort of grab the bull again and just go and run and run and run and run. He said, but the reason you were successful before is because you were really hungry.
Yeah.
So he said, create a void in your life, resist the temptations just to run back into something and just let it be. A concept that's probably not easy for me or you to understand, like just the...
I'm getting it now, though. I'm getting it now because, like I said, I've always had like 2 books a year. I've had a DVD out. I've had merchandise, pots and pans, protein stuff. I've always had something. But actually now I know I need to just chill out and take some time off because I don't want to be hammered. I don't want to be selling stuff to people all the time. I want to just get back to my free content, what I'm good at, what I start, the organic stuff that I genuinely started doing in the beginning, because that's when I'm happiest. When I'm getting millions of views on my YouTube channel, I love that. I love that people are actually like doing those workouts. It's 15 minutes of my time, but it's helping someone really transform their day. And so I'll continue to, push that mission, which is to get people moving. And if it's one person a day, like it's enough sometimes.
I just reflected then when you said that. I think of one of the conversations we had in that restaurant, which was you were saying, I've done the P with Joe, and what's next? And I remember saying to you, like, Joe, this is a false peak. Because did I say this to you?
I said, I don't think I'm going to achieve anything in my life that's going to have more impact, because there may never be another lockdown and there may never be like 80 million people in their living room doing my workouts again. But you were like, Joe, don't be silly. Like, there's something else. There has to be. Like, if you don't, you're going to lose it. You're going to lose motivation. So yeah, you said the thing about the moonshot. Like, imagine eradicating, whatever it may be, like going for that real, like Steve Jobs or Bill Gates like vision of like changing the world. It's exciting. It might never happen, but at least have a crack.
But you have this is why I refer to it as a false peak, because mountaineers, when they're climbing, they look up the mountain and they see these peaks, and because of the perspective of when you're climbing a mountain, it looks like the top.
Oh, of
and
course,
so they climb up and they stop and they go, oh fuck, but it's a false peak. And I think for you, this is going to be a false peak because now you have more power than you've ever had. So you have this, in my view, again, not telling how you live your life, you have a responsibility you're a fucking MBE, everyone knows your name now, and you've got a power to do things on a global level that even I'm not sure yet you realize you're capable of doing. And I think when you realize what you're capable of, then you're going to find a why, because listen, you can't waste the power you've got. You just simply can't. And there's a lot of pain out there. There's a lot of people getting fat. There's a lot of people not eating right. And they need someone that has your power. It's like, life has given you this responsibility and gone, Joe, listen, we need you. And I think that's enough to get out of bed for every day.
That is the goal, mate. And it's so lovely to hear you say that. And I do believe that we have a purpose and we have an energy inside us. And I bumped into this guy once on the street in London, and he was really, I think he was a shaman of some sort. And he basically put his hand on my shoulder. He does my workouts and he's like, there's something about you. Like, you've got an energy. There's something pushing you forward, isn't there? Like, it's more than views and fame and numbers. Like, there's something inside. I said, yeah, like there is. It's this energy that is constantly like, just go and film the workout. I know you're tired, but do it. And it's that thing of giving. I'm my happiest when I'm giving and sharing. And the minute I stop that, even if I sell the body coach, I know that moment will come where I feel like, I still need to be doing what I'm good at and still need to be reconnecting. And that is my energy. That's that. And I didn't have that. I was really lost and confused until 25. I came back from this trip to America. I started to become a personal trainer, and it was like, I just knew in that moment, this is what I was going to do. And I've just put all my energy and love into it since. So yeah, let's see what we can do in 2021.
Thank you so much for your time, Joe. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm super excited to bring you back on for a third time once you've conquered the world.
Thank you,
and
mate.
We'll be like, we were sat here, and you said this, and then...
I know, it's been a pleasure, Matt, and I really do enjoy your podcast. I take little nuggets from it. I think you're always sharing a positive message, so keep doing it. It's good to see that you're growing and building, and I hope this episode does really well for you.
Thank you, mate. Appreciate you. Always.
Nice one. Good luck, mate. Thank you for sharing all of your wisdom and learnings. I'm continuing to be inspired by you. I can't wait to see what you achieve in the next few years. Now go and get your moonshot. Go and build a rocket.